Okay, we're now looking at. Okay, so we should now be live again. Now, can you just check that we're actually live, Morten, before
Yeah,
we
I'll
before
just
celebrate too much?
just verify.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
hoping
I'm
that.
not even sure there's much we can do. I mean, I can try and extend the internet for tomorrow, get it
Hmm.
closer to you because I'm upstairs and it's downstairs behind like a brick wall.
Ah, okay.
Okay, we're live.
Yeah, cool. I'm just gonna redirect the link as well. Just once we have a link to this. All right. Yes. So we tried now streaming for a little bit.
It's set to private. You need to change that to public.
Shit. How do I even do that?
Edit the stream. Maybe I can do that from here.
Okay.
Customization and no, I don't see it. Oh, there we go. Private, public, save. Okay.
All right. So presumably we're now live again, where Morton's potato
Again,
internet has taken over, and
literally potato internet. That's
literally potato internet. Yeah. So we are going to be doing a little bit of streaming here. Morton's going to take your questions, same as yesterday, and then I'm going to be sculpting some cool stuff up, which I think is going to be quite interesting. So apologies for the issues we've had so far. I'm just trying to find the link now to it so I can just redirect it. Okay, there is a live one here. Cool. Yeah, I see it. Then there we
okay.
go. We have 20 people watching. I'm just gonna have to redirect the last link we had. This is a second redirect.
Yeah. We can just pretend that I'm sculpting.
Yeah, we can.
I'll just wave my Wacom pen.
Yeah, Morten will just
Hang
be
around.
just 15 seconds delayed. So what's happening?
It's actually really confusing. Like sort of when you're talking about, oh, no, I'm doing this and I'm tweaking this, and you're like, right. Let me wait for that to happen.
Yeah, particularly if I'm drawing as well on top of it. Yeah, so it seems to work all right now at least. It's interesting that we can see your face fine, but we like in the stream, but like when you're actually streaming, it doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, now what we'll do is we're going to do a fun little sculpt here, and then Morten is gonna just take your questions, and we're just gonna be just be going for around maybe like 2 hours or so. I'm gonna try to start every single sculpt a little bit differently, where now I'm just starting with a simple sphere like this, and it doesn't really matter exactly how you sculpt it. What matters is how you're thinking about it, because you could start very methodically and be like, okay, we're starting off with the bones and getting in the bones properly, then you start with muscle, fat, and then skin. Or you can just kind of do that in your mind and just go for it. Basically, you can in theory get started just with the final strokes. Remember, it's all just down to points in space. So oftentimes what you have to do, at least if you're a beginner, you have to build up so that the points in space make sense. But if you're really advanced, you can do this in your mind, and you kind of sculpt in your mind before you put down the stroke, and then you just know where the stroke is going to be. Not easy to do. I definitely can't just like imagine the whole sculpt for myself and then put it down, but I can do a bit of it. So I don't necessarily have to do all the anatomical pieces and such before like actually put it all down, because I can like just infer where some of it is.
Coco is asking, is it true that ZBrush isn't really 3D and that's why we can have such good performance? As far as I know, yes, it's not like true 3D, which is also why each subtool is like a separate thing. They don't really interact with each other. I don't know really any of the technical details, but it's sort of like it's a continuation of the way that ZBrush was built with the whole 2.5D engine where you have depth in pixels. So not really 3D, but kind of 3D.
Yeah, you're gonna see this the limitations of the architecture of ZBrush. Again, without us knowing the actual code of it, but you can see the limitations and kind of how it's built up whenever they're adding anything new. Now, a lot of the new stuff they're adding will be added as plugins, which are actually like standalone pieces of software. And like for instance, undo is all based per subtool, and if you delete one, it's just gone forever. So a lot of these kind of limitations. And same, like it took a long while to actually get like perspective view in ZBrush, and even like subtools took some years to get. Subtools came in like 2007, I believe it was, with the release of ZBrush 3, and so for the longest time we couldn't have actual subtools. So there are a lot of weird things like that as a result, but also a lot of weird magical things which can happen as a result of that.
Yeah.
Emil is saying, hey guys. Well, hey Emil. Hey Mr. Fast Track.
I think we need to just push out a link to the stream on Twitter as well.
Yeah, so I did that before. It should be the same link as before, since I did a redirect for it.
No, it's just a picture. There's no text in the tweet, so I'll just let me just.
Of course.
Let me just get to that.
Can't get it all. Just a picture. That's weird.
Is our giveaway is live, right?
Yeah, it is.
I think we should tell people about that. So on Twitter, we are doing a giveaway right now, where you just gotta retweet our giveaway tweet, which I will find in a sec, and then you'll be eligible to win Ben Ertz's new advanced character creation course that we recently published.
What do you guys think?
First,
what do you think about VR modeling? That's a good question.
I still haven't tried it. I really want to try it because it looks interesting. But it looks like an interesting concept. I can see a lot of people doing interesting things. I'm really curious about the sort of fidelity of your sculpts, like being able to do really precise things. I've seen they're more artistic expressions, more sculptural things, but definitely not to the same degree as you can do in ZBrush, but it looks like an interesting medium to play around with.
I'll try it a little bit because I know some people who's developing their own VR sculpting software called Codon. Really cool stuff. And one of the interesting things about it is that you can do like a stroke going through space, while in ZBrush you really only have two dimensions. You have up and then left and right. So of course you can rotate and do it, but here you can truly do like three directions, and I think you might be able to hold a button as well for pen pressure, so you can make it thinner or thicker. Probably the most prominent one is like Adobe Modeler, which looks like a really, really cool software. I tried a little bit. Now it's I think it's out of beta, and I was trying it just like a few months ago, and it's still pretty rough around the edges, but really interesting what's happening there. I think it can do, Adobe Modeler can kind of do to ZBrush what Painter did to Mari, in a sense that it's not at all going to replace it for a lot of cases, but in some cases it absolutely is. So it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to be happening there in that field. One of the problems is obviously that you need to have a VR headset for that to work, which is quite a barrier, because I don't have a VR headset yet at this point. Like, it's still expensive tech.
Yeah, I've been looking into getting one just because they've come quite far, especially with the new PlayStation VR 2, I think, or whatever. There's supposed to be a lot of really cool developments with it, and I'm just kind of eager to try it, because the last time I tried a VR headset was the Oculus Dev Kit 1, like the very first VR headset that really hit the market. I haven't used one since then, so I'm sure a lot has happened.
Yeah, I remember when we tried that was a new unit. It was actually 2012, and that's over 10 years ago now.
Yeah, so yeah, probably some few
things
developments.
Here's a really good question. You guys mentioned the question of whether to sculpt skin details or do it through height map texturing in something like Substance Painter. What's the general conclusion on that? There isn't really a general conclusion, because everything is all like the whole, it depends. So if you're trying to do something for 3D printing, for instance, then you can't really do it in texturing, because you don't really print texture maps. But if you're and it also depends what you're using for. If you're using for concept art and such, we need to do something quick. Then it's definitely an advantage to do it in the model directly, because it's just a lot more direct. Even if you're doing something for production, it's still kind of beneficial to do parts of it in the in ZBrush as well, because it's much more direct. Like, you're actually manipulating polygons right away. You know, those are some of the pros. So you can really interface with the pores. The con of that is obviously that it's highly destructive. So if you want to change the model, it's a lot harder to do that. Also, you need a lot higher poly counts, and also the fact that it's significantly faster to do something in something like Painter or Mari, in terms of you can do procedurals. You know, you can do like tileables, and you can really play around with that, and your poly count can be quite low. So like when I was working in production, I would always do this in Mari. Like Mari was a much better tool, and we have some videos from back then as well on how to do that. But for like our personal work, you know, whatever works for you, you can also do a bit of a mix between as well, the two. But one isn't objectively better than the other, though I would say for production, doing it in Mari is probably objectively better. But there isn't like an absolute truth to which one is better. For that as well, I recommend, actually speaking of alphas, I recommend a product called the FlippedNormals Face Kit. Let me show that real quick. We have a Black Friday sale where everything is 50% off. So we actually have a skin kit here, which is fantastic for just skin pores and just general pores for like the body and the face and all that. And then we have one, which is this one here, which is amazing for specifically the face. So this one here has been made to really work for specific face regions. So you can use this both in Painter or in Mari or in ZBrush. So that's going to work really well. But it's a fantastic question, like how do you do fine details? There definitely isn't like a quick answer to that. There's
one. Do you think you can achieve the same level of sculpt details in Blender as in ZBrush with the same device specs? I know that Blender's getting more and more powerful, and you're able to actually subdivide up to pretty crazy levels now. It's been a while since I sculpted in it. At the time, though, it was still a little bit iffy with the multi-res thing, but I think that's been fixed now, right?
I still don't trust multi-res, to be honest. It's still nowhere near like the subdivision system in terms of like how stable it is. You also don't really have layers, which is a problem. I find that having tried that in Painter or in Blender, that performance at higher poly count levels is still not fantastic. You can technically,
especially when you undo. Especially when you undo.
Yeah, then it's miserable. Well, the first undo stroke it's like awful.
Right.
Yeah, it's Blender is still nowhere near ZBrush basically in terms of that at the moment. But you know, could change in the future. Though it seems like development of the sculpting tools in Blender aren't really actively developed. It seems like they're moving on to like other things at the moment. But
I think they also, I mean, they had a massive push forward, like 2 years ago, a year ago as well. But I think for me, one of the bigger things there is still just feel. Like sculpting in Blender has a different feel than ZBrush. It's so hard to explain, but it just feels soft. I don't know.
I think it's like measurable as well. I don't think it's just like a personal preference. I was working now with a mentee who really wanted to sculpt in Blender, and I was like, okay, it's fine for what you want to do, but for what you're doing now, but if you want to be a professional, you actually probably should switch to ZBrush. And then he jumped to ZBrush during a mentorship, and he was like, I wish I'd done this sooner, because it's just more. He was just able to get better shapes. I could see that, like, getting like the block in stage, what I'm doing now, you can do this fine in Blender as well, like no problem whatsoever. When we get into like the proper polishing stage for it, then it became really hard to get the same finishing in ZBrush as it was in Blender. So he was like really excited to properly get it into ZBrush, because he was really getting he was reaching technical limitations of sculpting in Blender.
That's pretty interesting, actually. Can't buy a tablet right now. You think I can get a good base on sculpting on mouse? I would say no.
Oof, don't do that.
It's like two different skill sets. Um, it's like a pen with a tablet. You know, you have pressure sensitivity. A mouse has one. It's like a click on or off.
Yeah, it's also the accuracy, but also ergonomics as well. Ergonomics is really bad with the mouse. You're for sure going to get issues in your hand if you keep sculpting with a mouse.
Yeah.
So what am I sculpting now? Well, you know how we say use reference for things, and you know how Morten was going to sculpt today, but then issues happened. So you know how
I am sculpting, right? I have
yes,
right.
yes. So you know how I may not have time to collect reference at this point. So what am I sculpting? Let's see. Let's see where we end up. It's kind of fun as well, just like completely freestyling, because I actually don't really know where I'm ending up. It's one of those oftentimes when I'm doing this, the character finds himself. In terms of reference, it's definitely useful to have reference. But what I often do, I kind of doodle around like this. I kind of see where the character goes, and then I find reference to support that. Because using reference too early as well can solidify your sculpt too early, like meaning the design can be a bit too rigid, where you're not really trying to experiment with the design and playing around, you're just trying to follow something that exists. But now I'm kind of like entirely just like free sculpting for it, and then you can find reference to support that later on. But you know, obviously you should have reference.
I have a guess. I would think we might look at something that kind of grungy, a little bit angled. He's an angry person with maybe a few scars, broken nose, definitely a broken nose. That's gonna happen.
Not yet,
and
but
uh,
give it a few minutes.
He will break his nose. That's
he will 100% break
so
his nose.
And so it shall be.
It was written.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
someone saying, I thought Morten is sculpting today. Yes.
Yes.
So did we. We thought I was going to be sculpting. And I did for about 5 minutes, twice. But not only does my heating not work, apparently I have potato internet. So
yeah,
I'll see if we can get that fixed for tomorrow. Then I can maybe sculpt there. But yeah, maybe. I'll get a really long Ethernet cable. And actually, maybe that's what I'll do. I think I have like one of those, like a good 10 feet of Ethernet cable and just directly connected to my computer.
I can just send an Ethernet cable from London to Denmark.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any interesting questions? I haven't read this one, so I'll just see what happens. I really struggle on characters with the area around the outside of the eye and the upper side of the face. Could you maybe break down what those shapes should look like? Henning, break it down.
I will break it down. Okay, so I'm not entirely sure if I understand the question fully, but I will do a general block-in of what I think may be the question. So you can see we have a little anatomy dude up here. So I'm just going to be kind of tracing this. So what's really important when you're sculpting is, in general, you need the bones, muscles, fat, and then skin. I'm terrible at this. This should be bone. I'm going between letters and numbers here. Terrible. Anyway, you need to start off with bones. For muscles, not so relevant for the face, to be perfectly honest, because you won't really see them unless you're really like pulling a facial expression. So in this case, we're going to start with the bones, and then we're going to jump basically to fat and then skin. So bones, for this, you need to make sure that you have the cheekbones ready. You know, you need to have the bones going like here, and this just has to be in a good spot. There is no way you can do a somehow realistic face if you don't have the bones in a correct spot. This is the kind of stuff that kind of just needs to stick. Like, this is the kind of stuff that you just have to be able to do without really thinking too much about it, because otherwise you're going to be spending all your time collecting like just spending time on your reference. So you have to get the bones right, and then we need to have shapes around the the eye as well. I'm going to pick a different color for this. So this is where I know Morten can't see anything of what I'm doing now. So we have the upper lid, and the upper lid will go...
It's pink right now for me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's a good step. So the upper lid, you first have to just separate them out into the upper and the bottom lid. So the upper lid will go something like this. And keep in mind that it has thickness. How thick is the lid? Make it as thick as you think it is, and then make it a bit thicker than that. That's basically the rule for that. It's thicker than you think. And then we do the same thing here, and we need to have the lid going around it like so. So there are kind of two shapes for this. We have this lid, which is the upper lid, then we have the lower lid, and then we have like a fat pad going down here as well, which is like separate into like two, I believe. So it goes something like this. And then on top of this, now I need to pick a different color again. On top of this, we have some fat pads going over here as well. And this is what you can see when somebody's aging as well. It's not just a fat pad, it's also skin as well getting looser. So what you're going to see is if we have an eye, I'm just going to draw an eye here. So an eye will do something like this. What to keep in mind with the eye is that you have a corner. We basically have a corner here, and it's just a shape from one corner to the other. Really important to have these corners. So now we have the overall eye, and we have the lid going over it like so. And then what happens once you get older is that this shape here, the fat pad and the skin, it tends to sag over it. So you're going to see eyes doing this. And that means that this line here, which is fat and skin, is just going to obscure what's underneath it. So this is really, really important because this means that everyone is going to have this level of it. Like everyone is going to have this fat pad, but it how much you like your age determines this, your fat percentage, and just tons of general genetics as well. So this is like really, really key to understand. And then another little thing as well, which is really important, is new color, is we have the caruncula, which is this shape here. I know this is not answering exactly your question. Well, maybe. I'm not sure. I didn't understand fully the question. So we need to have this as well. And then basically we have a round shape going around it. So you're going to see that there's a round shape here. And then you have the iris and the pupil. And I tend to think about the iris as basically the same size as an open eye. Now, that's kind of true. This depends entirely, of course, on the size of your iris and depends on the size of the eye. But it's more often true than not that it's kind of the size of the open eye. So that's kind of it for a little explanation here. If you understand this, then it means you need to use significantly less reference, just because all this kind of stuff is basically the same for every single person, and then the main difference is going to be the proportion between these two. So I think it's really useful to be able to do this. It just means you can just go straight away and just go, boom, this is what an eye looks like. If you can do this, then it's much, much easier. Like the way I've been explaining this before has been with language. If you're trying to write something in English and you have to look up every single word, it's just going to take a long time. And it's more like you should figure out what you want to say or write, and then you should just be able to spend all your time formulating your thoughts. While if you're spending all your time looking up words, then you're going to be spending time, like precious time, just on like the basics of it, just trying to figure out what the word is instead of like what you're trying to say.
Something to note down for our future tutorial list, Henning.
Mm-hmm.
We seriously need to make a YouTube video about mouth bags.
We should.
Whatever the anatomical term is, I have no idea, but everyone wants to know about the inside of the mouth. And I honestly think the inside of the mouth is like the question we get asked the most.
Yeah.
Like all the time, it has to do with the inside of the mouth. So that's, and I answered it in the chat as well, just for anyone who missed it. Usually in production, or almost always in production, if it's a person, we'll start from a base mesh that already has the mouth bag modeled in. If you're starting from a sphere or it's just a sculpt where you need to add it, we would probably retopologize at some stage, then add that mouth bag, and then start sculpting details in ZBrush afterwards. It's really hard to do it straight in ZBrush when you have like a closed mesh and you would need to open the mouth, and that gets really tricky.
We had an interesting question kind of relating to this. We did like a quick Q&A on Twitter, and one of the questions was like, what is the most annoying part of doing a character? And I was answering there that it's actually the state between like once your retopology is done, and you have to reproject your sculpt onto the retopology. And the reason that is so annoying is that if you just have a sculpt like this, it's fine. But if you have like a more of a production model where you have a mouth bag and you have like tons of stuff in the eyes, this is stuff that's only added in retopology. And now you have two meshes that aren't really matching. Normally it should match pretty well, and if it is matching well, meaning the sculpt is matching topology, it's super easy to do it. You just basically hit project and you're there. But if it's not, that's a real pain, and you really just have to resculpt things and you have to mask out things. It's annoying.
Yeah, I think so. My work around, but the best work acting from the lowest level, go to the next level, and every time you step up a level, save a morph target, because that way you can always like easily get back to the level of detail you had before.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. I think your internet fell down a little bit, but basically like just store morph target before. Like do a subdivision level, or make a subdivision level, store morph target, do that level, then do the next level, and just continue from there. That's a very methodical approach.
I can't do anything today. I can't even talk. That's my internet is crippling me. I'll just join from like mobile data or something.
I mean, might actually be better. I often find that, or sometimes find if it's crappy internet and mobile data, it's actually all right.
Yeah, for the new place, I wanna like set up a couple of hubs so there's proper coverage everywhere. Because right now we just have one router, which is downstairs.
Yeah, here's a good question. Is the
Should I bite the bullet to learn? Oh,
sorry, Ron.
Never mind. You go ahead.
Yeah, there was a good question. Is the eyeball round, or is it like not? It was roundish. Technically, it's roundish, but practically, it's just round. It's for all practical purposes. It's just a sphere.
Let's see.
That just
what
makes
happens if I do this? Someone was just saying that it looks like I'm passing in and out of reality. I think. Let's see if I turn on the lights. That helps.
Would you guys consider having some kind of sub model on the website? It's something we've been talking about in terms of like, you know, maybe there's some kind of learning site in the future, but like it's hard to integrate a subscription model on the actual website the way it currently is. It might be possible, not directly obvious how you do that, considering we have creators for our own courses. That kind of stuff is kind of trivial to figure out because you just do a subscription to that. But once you have creators, that's a bit of a different one. Not ruling it out, not something that's currently planned in terms of like scoped out or anything like that.
Yeah, one thing that we sort of had talked about was moving all of our own courses over and then having a sort of split marketplace, but it's a tricky thing.
Here's some. How do you turn the head at the top right? Yeah, this is just what's here by default, or the actual head. The only thing I've done is I've just replaced it with my own anatomy model. Well, actually not my own. It's been the FlippedNormals anatomy bust, which you can find here. I'm going to just send a quick link to this here. So this is one you can very easily just replace it. In this case, we just downloaded the. I just have this file on my computer, and then you go to preferences, and then you go to cam view, and you just click make cam view, and then does that, and then you can just change the size of it, turn it on or off. And I have a few different ones. I have the default one, then I have a skeleton, and then I have this one. The cool thing about this is just main reference, so it means that I don't have to do anything. Like I don't have to load up a model just to have this for like overall reference, though of course I will have to if I do anything more serious. Would my sculpting skills in Blender transfer to ZBrush if I start learning it? Absolutely it would. Sculpting is really like a foundational skill. It's not a technical skill per se. Like if you have somebody who's good at sculpting, they're going to pick up any sculpting tool really fast. ZBrush is a bit of an interesting one in terms of you're purely technically sculpting, like in terms of the interface and such. It takes a little bit of time just to get used to that, but once you're used to it, it's really intuitive to use. But yeah, your sculpting skills will most definitely transfer, because sculpting is really about understanding shape, anatomy, gesture, flow, character design, all those kind of things. The actual technical sculpting is not that big of a part of it. Honestly, we can just go through the brushes we're using. Like basically, there are a few brushes you use. We have the standard brush, which is just dead simple to use. That's the only thing it's doing is just kind of standard sculpting. This would be like the draw brush in Blender. And then we have clay buildup, which is the one I'm using by far the most. And then we have move, which allows it to move. Then we have damp standard, which is awesome for like little creases. You can hold on the alt key and this just sculpts outwards. And then we have trim dynamic, and that's kind of it. Trim dynamic just does, this is kind of like a flatten brush. So the brushes from a technical point of view is very, very simple. And then you have like Dynamesh as well, which you have exactly the equivalent of in Blender. So yes, your sculpting skills are most definitely going to transfer between the two software.
Luca's asking if we're going to see any Maya courses anytime soon. We don't really have anything planned right now. I don't know about you. Do you have any ideas for Maya courses?
No, not really.
Coming up?
We launched a we launched a course this year, which is Introduction to Modeling in Maya, but we haven't done anything else.
Peter is saying, "Hey, Flip Boys." It's been a while since I heard that one. Flip Boys. Oh,
hey.
She's asking, very specific question. Do you know how to fix memory running out errors in ZBrush that happens when trying to load a tool? Yeah, so you could try and going into the ZBrush settings before loading in the tool, and then playing around with the memory allocation in ZBrush, then try to load in the tool. The other more shitty answer is try opening on a more powerful machine.
Yeah.
Because if it's like a really huge subtool with a lot of subdivision levels, your computer might just not be able to open it, which is really annoying. That's the only thing I can really think of.
You can try this one as well. Under mem, hit compact now. This is going to compact the memory. But then just like close everything else down. I think LP that may have a very specific issue at work right now. And it's like, anything important, how do I fix this?
Like Flip Boys technical service, like a mobile technical service, will just show up at companies and be like, okay, let's try to troubleshoot your ZBrush instance.
You pay us in ZBrush and YouTube likes.
Chris Pass says, try to delete history. It's way better. Yeah, that works for projects, but not necessarily for tools always. So, but it's a good suggestion.
You can go up
as
here
well.
as well to edit and delete under history as well.
I'm not entirely sure about this question, but Jens is asking, do you make girls working in 3D industry? I mean, we do make women generally. If that's what the question is about, then yes.
Yeah, there are a lot of girl models, I suppose, in the industry.
Probably 50-50.
Probably 50-50.
Nah, it's probably not 50-50, but
here's
is ZBrush Core good enough for all the courses you have? No, not all of them. The more basic ZBrush courses, you can get away with ZBrush Core. There will be some basic functionality that it will be missing, but once we start moving into intermediate and advanced courses, I would say no, not even close.
Here's a question. It's like, what's a good base mesh for characters? Here's one we have on screen. I'm posting this in the description. This is by Vincent Menier. We actually did an interview with him some years ago. This is a fantastic base mesh, which has both a male and a female one, and really solid topology, nice, simple to use, and nice UVs and everything like that. So this one is fantastic. I always point people towards Vincent's bundle. I
think it's probably the most, like, technically the best base mesh.
Yeah,
that
I think so.
I think is out there, like topology wise. It's clean.
Yeah, like there are some that technically look nicer, they have more character to them and such, but you want to be a bit careful with that, because you don't necessarily want something that has too much character in it, because you don't want to make a specific person. If so, then you should buy a scan. It's more like you want to have something that's nice and generic, so that it works for any character. So actually having too much character in a base mesh isn't actually a pro.
Your sculpt sort of reminds me of Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars, if he was sort of a vampire as well. And he's beefed up a little bit. You know, he's worked out. He's got a thick neck.
Yeah.
Grand Moff Vampire Tarkin.
I like that. I actually have a speaking of like courses before. I actually have something we can briefly talk about. Like this is something we've been talking a little bit about internally. But like a next courses, one course I really want to do is an introduction to anatomy course. Basically, like we have intro to sculpting, which covers a lot of cool things like gesture and frequencies and all that. But in terms of actual anatomy, I find that the courses out there are either very specific, where they go into specifically this shape here has all these specific characteristics, and it goes to this shape, and just notice all the things. When it's a lot to remember, and you may not use all of it. Like for instance, you don't necessarily have to understand every single muscle in the forearm to be able to sculpt, do a good sculpt. So like it's more like where can you cheat and where do you have to know the most important things, and just focusing on the most important things. So that's a course I really want to make in the future. But yeah, let's we have to figure just that out. But I think that would be a very popular and really cool course. Not like a hardcore anatomy course, like every single muscle A to B, A to Z, but just being like, this is the most important stuff. You don't know how to approach anatomy, but at the end of this course, you'll know how to approach anatomy.
A lot of people yesterday and also today have been asking about a hair card tutorial. The problem is we don't really do hair cards, either of us. We could learn to teach you, but that would be what we would do.
Can you just do that real quick, Martin? Just learn hair cards real fast.
Sure.
Yeah, easy.
I'll learn it. I'll watch some tutorials, and then I'll make a tutorial on it.
Here's somebody saying, hello from Bergen. Well, hello. I'm there in a month. Good times. I can't wait to be there in the rain and the cold and all that.
Miserable.
The question was, do you prefer doing secondary, tertiary details in ZBrush, or do you prefer doing them in software like Mari and Substance? I prefer, this is something we've talked about briefly before as well, but it's an ongoing stream. I prefer doing the, like for production, I prefer doing all the secondary details, also all the tertiary details, meaning pores and such. I prefer doing that in Painter or Mari. I definitely prefer Mari over Painter for that. You just have more control over it. But for like personal things, concepting, I definitely prefer doing it directly in ZBrush. You just have more control over it there. But the cool thing about doing it in Painter Mari is that you can use tilables. So like for instance with the FlippedNormals face kit or the FlippedNormals skin kit, both have tilables in them. So then you can load up like a fill layer in Painter, and then you can just tile things across, and you get much more resolution out of it that way. What I'm trying to do now when I'm sculpting, I'm trying to do a mix between the fat and the skin and some of the major muscles as well. Like for the face, like we can talk about that in terms of the muscles. Muscles for the face is one of those things that people focus too much on actual muscles. Muscles are important, very important for facial expressions. But if you just see a person, let's say you have a naked person, you're gonna, or like you have a torso and up, you're gonna see some of the muscle definition in them. You're gonna be able to see what the biceps and lats are, at least if they're somehow fit. But if you look at their face, you're really not gonna be able to see muscles directly. Now, there are few notable exceptions. So one of the exceptions is going to be the muscle going here. You have a ridge here. This is where the bone goes. And it goes something like this, and this goes down into this point here. What's happening is that you have if I pick a different color, you have a bone here. It's called a mandible. So it goes like something like this. And this shape, this goes to this guy here. So basically all this just goes towards this one here. And this helps you chew. which is, you know, a pretty big thing. Because when you're chewing, this is one of the few things you do in your body that actually requires, or in your head, which requires force. Because if you're just doing a facial expression, you're pulling your mouth corners up, you're blinking, you're really not pushing and pulling that much weight around. But if you're doing if you're crunching some nuts with your teeth or something, you require a significant amount of force to do that. That means that the two muscles you actually do see will be the muscles going from like around here to here and here to here, and both are, one is pushing the jaw up and one is pushing it down, so that you just you just have a lot more force to make the jaw go together, basically. So purely mechanically, the muscle you have here, the masseter, and then you have the muscle up here as well. I think it's called the temporalis, may not. And these are two of the ones you're actually going to see. You're of course going to be seeing some of the other ones going around the eyes as well, but in general, these are the ones you're going to see. And then you have one as well, which is, if I just draw this in bone, this is in the neck. So we have the clavicles here, and up here as well. This is where the scapula goes as well. Important to note that the scapula goes down here. And then we have the skull going down here, and the skull goes something like this, and it goes into a little notch here. And this is important because this is called the mastoid process. That's right here. And we have a muscle called the sternocleidomastoid, muscular sternum as well. So we have the sternum here, and it goes down like so. So just break it down. And anatomical names are all over the place. Some are named after the location, some are named after the function, some are named after like a geometric shape. In this case, sternocleidomastoid. So in this case, we have muscle that goes from the sternum to the clavicle to the mastoid process. It really splits out like this as well. So it goes like this. And these are some of the only muscles you're actually going to see in the face when it's somehow neutral. Like, at least, you know, if somebody's like clenching their jaw, you're going to be able to see this. I'm not sure if you can see it on me now because I have headphones, but if I clench my jaw here, you should be able to see some of the shapes. So, which means that, okay, so what's the rest of the face then, if these are kind of the only muscles? Well, around like the eyes and such, you have fat pads, and also you have muscles going around here, of course. But like a lot of this is just pure fat pads. Same here as well. You have fat pads here, you have fat pads here, you have fat pads here. And then you have, for areas like, I'm running out of colors. For areas like the nose here, this is all just like cartilage. So these are like specific shapes that would really just like give you highly specific shapes for that. Same with the ear as well. This is all just cartilage. So basically for the head, don't worry too much about the specifics of the muscles unless you're doing facial expressions. So that's just a little lecture about how you can more easily do faces. Basically, you should know what most things in the face are made out of, because that's going to make it a lot easier. But yes, for facial expressions, muscles are absolutely vital. But for a static face, cartilage, fat, and skin are very important, particularly for dealing with aging, because then stuff is going to start to sag quite significantly. And I'm now done with my little explanation. So we can do more more questions.
Let's have a look. How long does it take to remember all the muscle names? It's different for everyone, but that's not really the important part here. Remembering muscle names isn't going to do too much. Sometimes, you know, like Henning was pointing out with the sternocleidomastoid, it can help clarify things for what the muscle does functionally. But, you know, it's not what's going to make or break your sculpt for you. That's more understanding how the muscles and fat and cartilage actually interacts with each other.
For the course, we briefly talked about before, like intro to anatomy, like whenever I do like mentorships and such, I'm kind of trying to like keep that in back of mind, like just what kind of things would I teach in intro to anatomy. And one of the things I would love to do, you know, this course may or may not come at some point in the future, hopefully it will. But one thing also I would love to talk about there is just cut away the majority of the muscles, and it'll be left with maybe something like 30 or 40 muscles that you have to memorize. And I really think you can break it down to just a few muscles there. Like you have a few muscles for the head, for the neck, for the torso, for the arms, for the legs and the feet and such, because that would be the most important thing. So I think you could probably break it down to to those few muscles. And the thing is, you don't have to memorize all their names. You just have to memorize overall their shape and what they're doing. Because memorizing their names, then you're getting into. I mean, it's a good idea to some level to do it for sure, but man, then you're getting into a game of memorization, which is pretty tricky for a lot of this.
Jojo is saying, I don't understand the cleido part in sternocleidomastoid. It's not even Latin for clavicle. That's correct. Sometimes these things just pop up as names. There's a disease as well. Cleido. Something. I don't know. It has to do with the clavicle in your skull or something, or your head. Sometimes it's just relics from other languages that gets adapted, and that's what to go with.
Yeah, this is where if Elpida is still watching,
I'm
maybe
almost
it's Greek.
convinced to buy ZBrush.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Could be, yeah. As someone was saying, they've almost been convinced watching ZBrush by watching our videos. Almost.
You should, if you do, you should tell Maxon.
Say, hey, FlippedNormals sent me. Yeah, Cleido is indeed a Greek term.
There you go.
No, it's not. That's the cranial part. Do you have a tutorial for facial expressions? No, we don't. That is something that I could maybe make in some time once we have actually time to do stuff again. That would be fun.
Yeah. Do you guys do mentorships as well? Yeah, I'm doing mentorships. We don't really have an official mentorship program, but if you're interested in that, you can shoot me an email at henning@flippednormals.com. I only have 2 students at the same time, so I don't have a crazy amount of capacity for it. But yeah, henning@flippednormals.com if you're interested in that.
Have you guys ever thought of making a competition?
Oh,
yes.
Wow, yes.
And we have had competitions in the past, and it is something that we're hoping to bring back next year.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would really love to do like a super epic competition. We have a forum and everything set up for that. Like that stuff shouldn't be that hard to technically set up.
No.
We just need to, we need to find some good sponsors and we need time for it. So I guess while I'm sculpting now, maybe you can talk more briefly about like why we haven't been super active on YouTube and such. We've been trying a little bit, but we haven't been as active as we've been over the first years of FlippedNormals.
Basically, we're just lazy. That's all it is.
That's all it is.
So over the past few years, we've had a lot of technical difficulties. Let's call it that. So our entire website, the marketplace, is a WordPress website, which is functionally a blog that we've repurposed, and we've sort of reached a size much sooner than we sort of thought or ever anticipated that the way that the site is built just hasn't been able to keep up with the demand. And so for the past 4 years, I've been sort of trying to keep things alive development-wise, and then for the past 2 or so years, we've actually contacted a dedicated dev team that's been building a custom new website from the ground up, everything from the ground up, to make everything better. So that's the new marketplace that's going to launch hopefully at the end of this year, which is going to free us up to do more things, more courses, more YouTube content, which is something that I'm dying to get back into. Like YouTube is my little baby. I love that. I've been on YouTube for 15, 16 years. I have, 10 different channels. And I just love the YouTube format, and I love engaging with the community like that. And so hopefully next year, the new website should allow us to do that, focus more on that again.
Yeah, because you're more
recently I just found my very first...
No, sorry, go on.
Maybe like a week or 2 ago, I found my very first YouTube channel where I did like acrobatics and stuff. That was kind of fun.
It's interesting one because like my girlfriend keeps making fun of me for being a YouTuber or an influencer. I'm like, no, no, YouTuber, influencer. I'm okay. Entrepreneur, startup founder, and 3D artist. But it's like, but you're more like, no, I am a YouTuber, right? It's more like a thing. It's a very interesting one because like it's end of the day, it doesn't matter at all what you call yourself. It's just like, yeah, you do YouTube videos. I think it's really fun to do YouTube videos and to do streaming like this as well. It's really it's a very rewarding thing as well. Like one of the coolest things is when people say that, yeah, they actually got a job because they watched some of our YouTube videos, or not directly. You watch a FlippedNormals YouTube video and there is a job email for you right away. But like, just if you watch enough, and if you like, some people have been watching a lot of them and they've been taking a lot of advice from them, and then over time with their own work, they've been able to guide their career in a way that meant they were able to get employment.
Yeah. No, I think YouTube for me is such a interesting medium because you bypass all the traditional stuff that has to do with client customer relations and all that stuff. You have your community, you have people you can talk to directly, especially when you're doing streams like this, right? And one of the things that I was thinking of for once we revive the YouTube channel is having maybe weekly or bi-weekly ask FlippedNormals videos where we sort of take questions from everyone and then we do a video of it, kind of like what we're doing now, but just in a shorter format. YouTube, I just love doing it. I love making videos. I love creating content for YouTube. It's something that I've always kind of done one way or another. And then FlippedNormals just happened to be the one channel that kind of grew compared to the others. So, and the bonus I think here is that I get to teach people something at the same time.
I'm gonna try some wacky stuff now. I'm gonna try to use some VDM brushes on this guy. We have a pretty cool kit called the FlippedNormals creature kit. I'm gonna try to load that guy up. It's really fun to just play around with that.
Kind of looks like someone took a wall and hit him in the front of the face.
Yes. Let's see. Okay, second monitor here. Okay, we have a horns brush. I haven't used this in a while. The FlippedNormals creature kit is one of the like coolest things we made. I think we made it the moment they had VDM brush support in ZBrush, and I just love doing
instantly.
That. Instantly.
I think. I mean, didn't you kind of have the idea for that even before they added it?
I had this idea since 2010 or 2011. I was coming up when I was basically in high school. I was trying to come up with ideas for how I can make money as a student. I was like, well, I can make some kind of creature kit. And was like, okay, first of, where do I host it? Second of, how do I do it? And because there was no Gumroad or anything back then. And and then finally it was like, now they finally launched it. And I was like, boom, now we can finally do that bloody thing I've been wanting to do for years now. You just need a bit of resolution for this to work. So I'm just trying to find here, and then we have horns. One thing that's super cool about this is you can just drag it out. I actually want to show you guys this because this is really cool. This is it's a bit of an older product, but it's perfectly valid because it's not like the audio is old or anything like that. It's just actually it should be opposite of newest, should be most popular because it's just VDM brushes. It's just proper VDM brushes just made. Let's see, creature kit. There we go. I'm just going to send this in the chat as well. So this is super cool. Like, all of these guys here, they were made like basically within like 40 minutes or something, just by like the horns are just dragged out, the mouth, the ears, the noses, all that. It's just like instant boom. I might actually just play around with this as well for one of the characters, because honestly, like I said before, I had no idea what the hell I was doing when I started this guy. Now I just doodled around like crazy, just to see what works, what doesn't work.
There was a question before, which was interesting. Can't quite remember the exact wording, but it's sort of like, what's your most prized creation?
In terms of like tutorials, or in terms of like
that you've ever done? And for me, that would probably be Raijin from Pacific Rim 2. That that I got to do sort of from the ground up. Basically, we had and so I did Raijin, one of the, I think the largest aside from the mega kaiju. That's sort of like where all the kaijus combine.
This is Raijin. I have him open now, Morten, so people can see.
Yeah, I can't see anything.
No,
so.
just letting you know.
I think it was a full 8 months of work for me on that guy, and that was doing, everything. It was, we were looking into the anatomy of the creature. The production crew ignored my comments about anatomy, so we had to go back and fix all that, even though I flagged it 6 months prior.
Not bitter. 7 years later.
not bitter at all. And I remember that. You just had that up. Man, we had to 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month into production of the kaijus, we were asked to wrap up some things so we could send it off for toy production, which meant that we had to do so much wasted work because we just had to wrap up some version for toy production, which we would then have to scrap and then basically lose 2 weeks worth of work in order to sort of continue afterwards. That was bullshit. But that was really fun.
Speaking of bullshit, I know you can't see this yet, Morten, but like I'm on Jonathan Opkenhafen's art station. That was our art director, and he was able to post this.
Oh, I already know what you're gonna say.
This is Raijin 2. I can talk about it since it's actually out here. Jonathan says, like, unfortunately, this guy got cut from the film. This was something that Jonathan and I would constantly rub together. Like, the character model was basically ready for retopology, and then we just got a note one day: Raijin 2 cut from production. It's like, oh man. Yeah. That was.
We went out, had a long lunch, and
you were spending so much time,
and then I think it was the same day you got another email saying that one of your other assets, like this brain in a jar or something, was also gonna get cut, which ended up making it back into the film. But that was like a double stab to the heart.
Yeah, that just sucks. It was one of the coolest things there. In terms of like my most prized possession, like honestly. It might actually be this course here. Like out of all the things I've ever done, like I really, really, really enjoyed this one. I'm really proud of this course. Not generally trying to sell this course. Like I just spent a lot of time on this. This is something I've been spending a very, very long time on. It started off as a personal project, rebuilt the whole thing for a tutorial, and just really like put my soul into this one. In terms of like commercial work, the coolest, well, this is technical commercial work, but in terms of actual like VFX assets, is either the Mega Kaiju from Pacific Rim 2, where I work for Morten, or it's the Alien from Alien Covenant, because that's just such a cool and iconic thing. Like in terms of iconicness, like that's the most iconic thing, because we spent like 3-4 months on that, I think. It was quite a long time just on sculpting the Alien Covenant, and well, the Xenomorph from that. And once you're done like something like that iconic, that's just like, well, that's cool. That's just a really cool thing to have worked on. But and like there was actually a question as well on Twitter today. It was in the Q&A thing, like what movie would you want to put FlippedNormals on hold for a year? And like literally no movie. Like the stuff,
Gods of Egypt 2.
Apart from obviously Gods of Egypt 2. I mean, I thought that was already a given, but apart from that one.
I also just realized, just a quick plug, something that we will do, I think, next year as well. I realized on the stream we're actually able to put FlippedNormals merchandise on the stream. So I just put some of our merch there. But that's something that we talked a little bit about doing, sort of a more clean merch lineup for next year. So we actually have some super cool merch. It's gonna probably be a little while before it actually comes up, but if you want to get some socks or something for Christmas, a work for exposure hoodie, you can get that in our merch shop.
I think it's cool, like when we see Andrew Price and he has like the Polygon Polygon merch. So I want some of that as well. I don't want like Polygon merch. I want FlippedNormals merch.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking maybe should make some nice merch, and then I could always wear that on stream. Yeah, because that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Morton, has your rock sculpting techniques increased after working on Gods of Egypt? I mean, they peaked. So I developed my highly technical and artistic focus on artistic rock sculpting techniques during the Gods of Egypt production. So mostly that comes down to some really, really solid alphas, actually. Just a pro tip. So like scanned rocks, and so okay, basically best way to make rock alphas is take a bunch of rock scans or scans of rocks and then do like a depth map or a VDM brush in ZBrush. Take that and have that as your rock brushes and get different kinds of rocks. It could be like pebbles, it could be sandstone rocks from the Grand Canyon, whatever it may be. Just build up a library of that. That's how you peak with rock sculpting.
There was a question here. How do I find the model in top right corner?
Do you intend to make FN a full-on studio later on and get your own feature film? No. We will never become a production studio.
Yeah, let's not try that again.
Oh yeah, we have done that. Aside from FlippedNormals,
yeah,
so we're not doing that.
There was a question here. There's a bit of delay on the Zoom here, but like basically, how do I find the model here in top right? This is actually an anatomy model we made kind of recently, and you can find this by going to FlippedNormals.com, and we have a product here. This is 50% off now, so it's like $12.50, and this is something wrong with the link here. I'm going to try something again. Yeah, this just covers a lot of different anatomy stuff. It's not a course or anything, it's just a pure anatomy model. I can actually go through some of this. It's actually kind of interesting, like not just a complete shell of the product, but just generally just breaking it down how it works. So I can go through this, and I can go through the sculpt I'm doing now, seeing how it compares. The horn thing is not really superhuman anatomy, so I'll just hide that for a little bit. Yes, I can just do a quick breakdown of how these things compare. Basically, everything when it comes to creature sculpting, human sculpting, it's fundamentally the same. People are really, really the same in terms of our building blocks. So let's do a little bit quick drawing here. So blue is going to be bones. So you have a lot of bones in your face and in your, like in the portrait, basically neck and up. And the bones they're not like encompassing everything, but it's really important to get that right. So we have the cheekbone here, for instance, and this is what I'm trying to get in here. You know, it's not perfect what I'm doing here, but it's we're just getting cheekbones, we're getting the bones around the eye as well. This is the kind of stuff you see if you have a skull. The problem with just having a skull is that there's too much information, because like this whole area here is covered by not skull. Like there's other stuff here. So I'm trying to get this kind of stuff in here, like so. And then trying to get this up like so, and you can see how this connects up. So there's some important marks here. And then we have the superciliary arches that go like here. That's what I'm trying to get in here. We have the glabella, which is like here. So we have that here. And then we have, this is important as well, like this is where the nose ends, well, for the bone. So the bone goes here. And this is important because everything else outside here is cartilage. Then we have bone in this region here. This is where obviously you have bone under the whole thing, but it's where you have more visible bone. And then down here we have the clavicles. So this is where we have the clavicles down here. Then we have some bones here as well. So really, really, really important to get the bones right. So all this stuff is just pure bone. It was the same thing with the horns as well, all just bone. And then we have some fat pads, and this is where we have fat pads like here. It's called a malar fat pad or nasolabial fold. And this is actually one of the interesting things. Like when I started this anatomy model, I really had to learn a lot about how to do fat pads on the face. I generally assumed this was more like one shape going around like so. Turns out it's just a bunch of different fat pads. Of course, we have muscles going around as well. But you don't have like one muscle going around the whole thing here. You have muscles going from here and down here, but you don't have one thing wrapping around. So this is really a fat pad. And this is distributed into a few different ones. So for instance, this one here, this one is called the jowls, and this is where this one sags a lot. So if you look at someone like Churchill, this one really sags. The reason it's important to get the fat pads into the face like this is because otherwise it's literally impossible to visualize aging. Because one of the things that happen when you're aging is that the fat goes more further down. A fat pad in the beginning might look something like this. It's nice and and has a specific shape, but then it might go way more down like so that the shape up here just becomes like a vacuum. So really, really important to get the fat pads right here. We have a lot of different tissue around here as well. So this kind of stuff is super important to get right. And then we have muscle, which I'm just going to do in yellow. And then this would be like this was briefly talked about before. So this would be stuff like the temple muscle, and we have muscles here as well. Don't really see a whole lot of more muscles in the actual face like this. We have this, and we have this, and this, and we have traps going in here as well. So this goes like so. And then we have, there are obviously muscles going around here as well, as, for the lips and such. And this is where it's a bit of a mixed tissue. Same thing here as well. Everything that's here is a bit of a mixed tissue. It's kind of like it's skin at this point. And then we have, it's same thing with the eyes as well. This is all like mixed tissue as well, but also we have muscles for this as well. You need muscles for the eyelids so that you can actually close it down. And then we have some fat pads underneath here as well. This is where we have fat pads underneath here and fat pad here. So all this is important because it does really visualize aging. This is not like the most conclusive one, and we're probably going to do updates in the future to this. But there isn't honestly too much literature on this. Like, it's hard to find this. And then we have cartilage, and these specific pieces are really important because this is where these pieces, everyone will have these pieces, and the proportions are just different. So it means if you know this, that means you can basically sculpt any nose without too much reference because it's all just the same. It's just, they're just different proportions. Same with the ears as well, all just nice cartilage here as well. And then just goes up here and you just have specific shapes. So once you know this and once you can break it down into basically bone, muscle, fat, skin, a little bit cartilage as well, then it becomes a lot easier. And that's why we built this model. I basically built this model for the mentees I've been having, where, no, I didn't polish it to this level, of course, but basically when I was teaching how to do a face, it's really hard to just go like, just look at some reference and just build it up here. We need to be like, no, this shape here, this is a specific shape, and this exists here, and it goes from here to here. And here we have bone, and everything is connected. So if you're doing like some kind of more creature-like guy like this, or if you're doing like a supermodel, or if you're doing Arnold Schwarzenegger or something, it's all the same. It's just that they are different proportions. It's almost like you can do different sliders as well. You can do like in your mind, you can do a slider for how old the person is, and that would like age the fat, and that would age the skin as well. And bone as well. Like bone also ages. Like somebody who's older is going to have a mouth that goes more inwards like so. The jaw is going to be more rounded off. You can see this in like older people, like the jaw is more like this, and it goes more like this. And the nose keeps growing as well. This is why it's important to know these kind of things, because like the cartilage is going to keep on growing. Same for the ears as well. So the nose and the mouth is going to keep on, or the nose and the ears are going to keep on growing. So yeah, just a tiny little lecture. I'm just going to keep this guy here because it's really handy to have this reference up. I use this reference for basically everything I'm sculpting now. It's basically like my notebook, but instead of having specific notes for every single thing, like instead of having like actual written notes, I just have all the notes in this little shape. So yeah, that's my little little lecture on this kind of stuff. What would you get from the mentorship as an absolute beginner? So the mentorship I have is not for absolute beginners. It's oh, Morten disappeared. The reason for that is that you just.
I think I'm back.
Hey, I think Morten is back. The reason it's not for absolute beginners is because you just. It's not a hand-holding one where every single thing is shown. It's for people who are more advanced and wants to take their art to like the next level, or you might have been stuck for a very long time. If you need software help, then mentorship is not for you.
Just wanted to share something cool. I just spotted it in the recommendations. Someone did your realistic masterclass, and
Oh wow.
there's like a 1 hour. I think you found this picture of this guy doing it.
Yeah, this
I
guy
just didn't
sent
know
me
he
an
also made a
email,
video.
but he
Yeah,
hasn't sent me this. This is super cool. That's awesome.
I was looking in to see if we could connect our store somehow to have our tutorials being shown. You can if you have a Shopify store,
Ah,
but obviously our content isn't on Shopify. So
yeah. I'm thinking like maybe if we were to start FlippedNormals today, like maybe we would have even done Shopify because we had our own custom site in the beginning with like Gumroad and just setting stuff up there. Shopify seems like a solid system. Here's something I learned recently about the face as well, in terms of like making sure the nasal labial fold is in a good spot. You can draw a few different curves. You can draw a curve like this. Ooh, terrible color. This needs to be more vibrant. So you can have one curve that goes like this. Then you can have one curve that goes like this. Then you can have one curve that goes like this. And this also fits really well with like the nose as well. This is this curve. The malar fat pad is here, and this is this curve. And then you have the remaining fat pad here. So you can break it down like this. Obviously, this is a bit too stylized. Often you just see that even if it's a pretty straight line like this that you see a lot of people have, it's still a little indication of a curve here and a little curve here and a little curve here. So it's really useful to just think about them like so. What brush are you sculpting right now? This is the clay buildup brush with the Alpha 06. I actually have, like, this is a tiny bit of a rant, but the whole, like, what brush are you using question, a lot of people say that's a stupid question. I really don't think it's that stupid of a question, because if you're a complete beginner, you just straight up have to know what brushes you should use. Like, there are so many brushes in ZBrush. If you look at all the brushes, it's just overwhelming. You just genuinely will not know what to use. And it's not obvious that clay buildup is the one you should use. Now, if you've been sculpting for like 5 years and you really can't figure out like how to sculpt it all, like you should probably figure that out, like what brushes people are using just by watching tutorials and such. But if you're new to the software, or if you're just finding a way around sculpting and such, you just have to know what brush you have and what brush somebody uses. The way you figure that out is to ask them. So it's a stupid question if it's like, oh, if I use the same brush as you, I will be able to sculpt like you. That's just not the case. But just have to know what brush people are using. So clay buildup. You can do everything with clay buildup.
pretty much, yeah. It is the god brush now. I mean, it's
the god tier brushes would be clay buildup and damp standard, and then you can really do anything. A little bit of move as well, but with these brushes you can move mountains or sculpt mountains.
Someone's asking, does it work to freelance from a European country and just don't tell the clients where you're from and work for US companies with US salary? I mean, your location really shouldn't matter if you're working remotely, but they will want to know where you're located because they'll need to send you money. So
yeah, and time zones as well. Like if you're working in, let's say, if you're living in, let's say, Turkey or like Bulgaria, or like, you know, something more like towards the east, just in terms of time zones there, then you're like 2 hour time zone difference from London. That means you're like 11-hour, 10-hour time difference between like San Francisco, which means you have to turn your day around. If you live in like Portugal and the UK, and which is closer to the US, and then you work for a New York based company or an East Coast company, time zones is kind of okay. It's basically half a day difference. But if you live in Eastern Europe and you work for a Bay Area company, like that's just not really viable long term, just practically in terms of time zones.
is there a big difference between clay buildup and clay tubes?
Yes, clay buildup builds up and clay tubes does not.
Clay tubes. What is
clay tubes is the one that's basically a clay brush.
I can't remember.
But it has it has a harsh alpha. It's basically exactly the same, but it has a square alpha. So clay tubes, you see here.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I'm sculpting now. No matter how hard I sculpt, it doesn't build up. Well, if I sculpt with clay buildup, it builds it up. That's really the difference between the two. The difference between the clay brush and clay tubes as well is the fact that the clay tubes just has an alpha to it, while the clay brush does not have an alpha to it. So the clay brush is fantastic as well. The hotkeys is BCL, and this is really good as well. This is just a different way of sculpting. I really like this. This is what I sculpted with for some time until they introduced clay buildup. Kind of aging ourselves here because we've been sculpting in ZBrush for quite some time.
Here's an interesting question. I don't even know really how to answer it, but how do you make a character attractive? Attractive in the sense of physical beauty. Whoa, that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I guess it's looking at, so first of all, it's super subjective, right? What is attractiveness? I mean, there are some general guidelines to attractiveness. In people, symmetry and position of the eyes. It's very eye related, actually. The eyes are a massive thing there. But then finding reference of things or of people that you find attractive and trying to analyze.
I think we lost Martin a little bit. Don't worry.
What?
I got you guys.
Them attractive and pictures of people you don't find attractive and see what differences are. That would be that's
Where is that base mesh from? So technically it's not really a base mesh, though I guess you could use it as a base mesh. It's more a maintenance anatomy bust, and it's called the FlippedNormals anatomy bust. You can find it here. Just gonna find that's where the zeros came from. There we go. I'm just gonna send it here as well. And just a quick reminder that everything is 50% off during the FlippedNormals Black Friday sale. So we have, for instance, here's one we just released, which kind of went under the radar. This is called, it was originally called Sculpting Frankenstein's Monster, but it's called now as Character Concept Sculpting in ZBrush, where we sculpt, well, Frankenstein's monster from scratch. It's what, like 10 hours, almost 11 hours of video, all real time, showing you step by step how to make this, from his costume to his hair to everything, including like how to do the nice little skin and everything. Like, I'm strangely happy with this sculpt. Like, from like a sculpture point of view, like I really like how this guy turned out. It was tons of fun to do. So you might enjoy this one. This is a bit of a cheaper one. This is $15 right now, and it's a legit sculpting course. It was kind of practice for this course here. The sculpting of the two are basically the same in terms of like the teaching style and everything there. So I think you might enjoy this one as well. Henning moved to the UK and Morten moved to the moon.
Yeah, our Wi-Fi up here isn't as good.
No, on the moon.
As back on Earth. Yeah, no,
should work on that.
It's a bit spotty, you know. Especially on the dark side of the moon, yeah. It has to go through like rather small planetoid, but you know, whatever. Morton streaming from his fast access DSL. Yeah, that's oh man, actually garbage. Henning, how do you get clean eye loops when you see remesh models?
Yeah, you don't. Honestly, if you want clean topology, we can talk about this like briefly here. But like, if you want clean topology, or control topology, you really just need to do it by hand. The more you use ZBrush, or if you do a ZBrush, you're gonna be like, wow, this is pretty solid. I can use this. So you just have to fix some things, and then you look at the topology a bit more. You start to fix it, and then you realize that you actually just have to do it by hand. I find ZBrush to be really useful for sculpting, to clean up your model and such, but for final topology, I don't find it to be a particularly useful tool, specifically for faces, because you often need highly specific topology for that. If you need clean loops around the eyes, around the nose, all that, you just need to do that by hand. Or wait a few years until we have an AI that can maybe do that. Blender sculpting versus ZBrush sculpting. Can we have your thoughts? ZBrush, harder to learn, better sculpting, more feature rich in terms of pure sculpting. Blender, much easier to learn, but with worse sculpting tools, but a much richer suite of tools in general. It means that you can, for instance, like have a live render up while you're sculpting, which is just all kinds of awesome. But for pure sculpting, if you're very serious about sculpting, I really recommend just ZBrush. Like, Blender is nowhere close to ZBrush in terms of pure sculpting at the moment. And it hasn't really been updated in a little while now. Like, it seems like when Pablo left the Blender team, that sculpting was kind of dropped a little bit. So let's see where it is in a few years. But currently, the best sculpting experience to pure sculpting is going to be ZBrush. But Blender you can get into in like a few minutes in terms of how easy it is to learn.
Here's one. How do you sculpt hairy creatures? Do you still make the covered parts detailed? Yes, I mean, not like hyper detailed, right? You don't need like all the fine wrinkles and everything in the areas that are covered by fur. But one of the super important things is that you definitely need the larger sort of surface anatomy, because that impacts how the fur sits on the body quite a lot. Especially, with longer haired creatures, it becomes less and less important. But short haired creatures, which is most of them, I don't know, tigers, lions, horses, cows, I was going to say fish. Well, that's not really relevant.
Hairy fish.
All of that. Chimps, any kind of primate, it's really key that the underlying mesh is actually still good.
Yeah, particularly for something
like you don't need to worry about pores.
No, but for a horse or something, then you need like quite a lot of muscle definition. Well, if you're doing something like a bear, you need a lot less. You still need to define the muscles and such to a degree, but for like a horse, you basically need to sculpt it as if it doesn't have fur, because it's so thin. Here's something that's cool as well. I currently have some, like a mouth. I'm hating the mouth, so I'm just going to destroy the mouth.
Is Blender near industry standard?
What do you think?
I'm assuming my audio isn't getting through.
Your audio is getting through now.
Okay. Did you hear anything I said about Blender being near industry standard?
I heard you asked, is Blender industry standard? And then I heard nothing else.
Oh, I can see my internet keeps dropping. I don't know. I think I might need to skip out because this is getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, I can hear you now, but
I'll try to look into see if I can find my long Ethernet cable and get this set up for tomorrow, so I can actually do some sculpting.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna head out. Try to do some other things in the meantime.
You guys will be safe from me.
But yeah, Henning will hold down the fort.
Trust.
And hopefully Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully the London internet is not full of wind. So, yeah, see you, Martin. All right. Merton has now left us, and Zoom is here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be using the FlippedNormals creature kit for the mouth. This is actually a really cool way of doing it. So here we can see like we have a fish mouth, so we can just do like this, and you can just like experiment. One of the really cool things is just you can really go crazy with him. So you can try out that. You can make him a lion. You can make him like a flat and wide, like so. Or you can make him like super angry. You can just do all sorts of stuff. So tons of cool stuff you can really do with this. This one is quite cool actually. Not super cool. Let's see how this one works. So there are a lot of really cool things you can actually do with this one here. We can do like human lips. See how this works. Not a huge fan of this one. Let's see, alien. We can try an alien mouth for this guy. Nope, not working. Wide smile, we can try this one. Nope, I'm actually just going to stick to what we had before. Undo history is now gone. That means I have to sculpt the whole thing again, which is fine, whatever. I'll just have to sculpt that one again. So we can then use... we can go in and let's just sculpt them again. We're going to try some different stuff now with this. Bye, Morten. Yeah, hopefully Morten will get the internet under control. It's really hard to test that kind of stuff before we go streaming, because it was totally fine. We had a call beforehand, it was totally fine then, and then it just didn't work. So it's really hard to actually test this stuff out. The brush I'm using now is, for like smoothing, is called the Smooth Stronger. And you can just find it under Lightbox, and then you can find it under Brush, and then you can find it under Smooth, that's here, and then you can just double click it, and then you can go Smooth Stronger, and that's here. And there you go. So that's really handy. So when it comes to sculpting a mouth, I prefer to just kind of get started with the center line like so, and sculpt kind of like the curve into it, and then just like have a bit of curve to it, and then just block in the lips as well, block in the philtrum here, and then just carve in the lines like so. What's important about the lips is that you have a corner of the lips here. This is really, really important to have the corner of the lips. So then we just I'm just going to mark it in. This is similar to just like drawing on top with like a pencil. So pretty nice and simple to use this. And then you just have to be sure to add some dimensionality to it. What I find to be useful is if we have a line from here and down here. Often this is how it works, from the tip of the nose to down to the chin here. Often both of these tend to touch it. So the lip is like this, then they both touch it like so. So that's kind of the angle for it. So this is a really interesting way of looking at it. You just have to make sure that it doesn't look like she has Botox or something in his lips. The mouth has so much to say when it comes to making a good and solid character. And then just soften it off. You don't necessarily want the line around the lip to be super prominent. You want it to be there to some degree, but you don't want it to be completely crazy. And then we have the vermilion border. The vermilion border is the one that does go around the whole thing. Some people you can clearly see this one, and some people there's barely. This is an indication of it. All right, just adding the philtrum here. I'm just adding a bit of a shape like this. Gotta say, it's a lot easier to do this kind of streaming when Morten is here. I can focus more on the sculpt. The sculpt always turns out worse when I have to sculpt by myself like this, because then I have to talk and read comments and sculpt at the same time. Normally it's more like put on an audiobook, and I'm sculpting by myself at least without streaming. Put up an audiobook, put it up on some, put up a podcast or something, and just sculpt. So yeah, just come with whatever questions you have. It's really interesting to hear what questions you guys have. Do you have a good way to clean small leftovers of a mesh that are hard to notice? What you can do is you can make like poly painting from cavities and ambient occlusion. That can be a good way to see exactly what's missing. Oftentimes, then it's just going to highlight weird areas. Oftentimes, it's just going to display areas that are close together, but sometimes you're going to see some like weird artifacts. How much of hour can an artist sculpt a day? I suppose that means like how many hours can you sculpt a day? It really just depends on your stamina. It's something like you keep improving that as you go along. Like I've had days where I've been sculpting for 12 hours straight, and that's been like all right. You feel a bit tired afterwards, but that's not something you can do if you're a complete beginner. It's just going to be too like intellectually draining in the sense that you have to think a lot throughout, and also like your hand and arms and all that kind of stuff. And you just need stamina. But once you've been doing this for a while, that's kind of stuff is totally fine. Do you still think Blender's industry key map shouldn't be used? It can totally be used. I just recommend people not to use it. I don't think like it should be deleted or anything. The problem with the industry key map, it's not the industry key map itself. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a great key map, and it does. The intention of the key map is that it's supposed to make it easier for people to transfer their skills over to Blender without having to like in other hotkeys or other software. There is usually like a set of hotkeys that are more universal, and that's the goal for that. Blender is a bit more esoteric when it comes to the hotkeys. The problem is just that Blender is so goddamn hotkey based, which means that it's really hard to follow tutorials without using hotkeys. Basically, every single tutorial out there is using hotkeys. That's just the UX in Blender. The user experience in Blender is fundamentally hotkey based. So if you're trying to follow tutorials now and you're using the industry key map, you're not going to be able to. And also if you make tutorials and you're using the industry key map, people aren't going to be able to follow it because they use a whole different hotkey setup. So I recommend people not to use it, but if it works for you, then great. It just means it's going to be significantly harder to learn it. Any way to work with layers with partly hidden meshes? Yes, you just straight up just hide the part you don't want, Control Shift and drag like this, and then you just hide the part you don't want to see, and that's going to work fine with a layer. You just have to make sure to make sure the layer is active. How do you know when you're ready to join the industry or for a job in the industry? The way you know that is not by yourself. You can't really know that yourself. You have to ask around, like straight up. It's one of those simple answers. How do you know if you're good enough for an industry job? Well, ask somebody in the industry if you're ready for an industry job. It's not like an intuitive thing that you think you're ready. Basically, you don't know if you're ready yourself, because people are notoriously terrible at self-evaluating, and that's not like an insult. That's just like how it is. Like I can never evaluate my own work in an accurate way just because I'm too close to it. So if you think you're ready, maybe you're either over-evaluating it or you're correctly evaluating, but it's really hard to know. So ask somebody who works in the industry, and not just like if you want to be a 3D artist at Blizzard, don't just ask somebody who works at like a local print shop or something. Ask somebody who works at Blizzard. Find them an ArtStation, send them a nice short kind email, and then go from there. Do not, for the love of God, write them an essay. If you're writing professional artist, keep it short, keep it sweet. Something like, hey, my name is X. I'm looking for a position in this kind of stuff, but I just need someone to evaluate my work. Can you in a paragraph tell me what I should be focusing on? The problem is if somebody's like, hey, I promise to be brief, and then there is just like a wall of text. It's not like you're going to get a longer response from me. It means you're probably never going to get a response because I just don't have time for that. First, it takes maybe like 20 minutes just to go through the email, then you have to think about it, and that email takes half an hour out of your day, and you only have so many half an hours in a day. So really, really, really make sure that if you're writing professional people for advice, keep it brief. If I get an email that I can answer basically yes or no, then you're gonna have a good chance of getting a reply. If I have to properly write something down, it's just gonna take a while for you to get a response to that, unfortunately, if ever, just because it just takes too much time out of the day. how do I get a job with FlippedNormals? What are you guys looking for? Well, we aren't really hiring at the moment, so it doesn't really matter too much what you can do. We're keeping the team really small, so not really anything you can do for that. If we were to hire in the future, we'll definitely announce that on our social media. But right now, we're keeping the team very small. So what I'm thinking about when doing the nose is, you can see here on the reference, there are a few different elements. So first, we need to just have the skull ready. And this goes down to around here. And then we have one element that's here. This is all cartilage. What I'm drawing now is all cartilage. And this goes down like so. And this is this shape here. And then we have one shape that goes from here, and it goes all the way in like so, and up like so. And it goes like so, and goes in like so, and it goes up like so. And then we have the last piece that goes in like so. And this is going to be the same for every single character you're doing. So the more you study this kind of stuff, the easier it's going to get. So it's quite simple once you can break it down into these simple shapes. And that's why I made this an attribute model, because I need this knowledge on a daily basis whenever I'm sculpting. Like, it's not like I've been doing this for a while, but it just really helps me to have this. Like, for instance, I can just draw in the lines I need, and then I can like solidify them later on. So I can just do this, go in and just solidify them in, go in like this, and go up like so. And then we can just go in and just make them into individual elements. Something to be aware of though is that on most people, you can't really see these elements. You can see a little hint of them, but this is just something to provide structure. There's no necessarily logic to this, in a sense that it's not like a muscle or something that you can kind of think about the function. This is just a specific shape, same with the ear as well. It's just a highly specific shape. What podcast do you like while working? Well, there's one I've been listening to quite a lot over the last few years or so. It's called Behind the Bastard. It's basically about horrible people throughout history. Another one as well is Hardcore History, which just focuses deeply on like proper like 5-hour long episodes about something in history. So those are really solid. I'm sculpting with a mouse for 2 years. First, don't do that. If you sculpt with a mouse, you kind of just need to stop, because even if it's fine now, it's going to cause massive issues in the future. Like in a sense that your arm is going to get messed up. So highly recommend that you don't sculpt with a mouse. Like, that's one of my top tips for sculpting for beginners. Is, or if you sculpt 2 years, not necessarily a beginner, but you need just a tablet for pure ergonomics. I mean, I don't even use a regular mouse. I have like a vertical mouse here, so this is just super useful. What are the junior rates for character artist? Honestly, that's impossible to answer, just because it depends so much from company to company and from industry to industry, and most of all, country to country. Junior rates in something like Naughty Dog or Blizzard, which are all in the US, in California, I believe, where standard cost of living is stupidly high, is significantly higher than something like if you were to work for CG Project Red in Poland, where cost of living is significantly cheaper compared to something like at NPC, which is in London, where it's again more expensive. So it really just depends. And also depends from gaming to film as well. And from AAA to AA to indie to, you know, all that kind of stuff. It really, rates vary so much in the industry. How do you know if a shape is good for the next step? So we basically have the 3 different frequencies. We have the primary, secondary, and tertiary shapes, 1, 2, and 3. And the primary shapes are like all the primary shapes here, all the big shapes that affect the silhouette. Then we have the secondary shapes, which is what breaks up those shapes even more. Like this would be more like this kind of stuff and some more specifics here. And then we have tertiary shapes, which is the very fine stuff. So you know that you're ready for the next one when you can't squeeze out any more of the current one. This one here, is this ready for like tertiary shapes? Absolutely not, because it's just not there. There is still so much left to do on this character. So if you can take it further, it's not ready for that level. show off some practical and essential hard surface techniques. I'm going to keep this to just character sculpting for now. Where do you find inspiration for organic forms? Honestly, if you have a museum nearby with nice sculptures, go for that. Like really try to find some like nice sculptures. That's gonna help a lot. Otherwise, ArtStation as well is great. ZBrush Central is also good. Not true for CG Projekt Red. Warsaw is not cheap. Yeah, but there is not cheap, and then there is San Francisco cheap. Like not cheap, right? Like there is just a huge difference between these. Like Poland is still like a much cheaper than something like New York, Los Angeles, and such. But yeah, like I'm sure it varies within the country as well. Capitals in general tend to be very expensive to live in. Is there anything we should focus on with new tools or programs aside for ZBrush to prepare for the future? Whew, tricky one. Generally, focus on fundamental skills. This would be in sculpting. It's not knowing every single button in ZBrush. It's knowing how to sculpt. It's knowing how to create appealing shapes, how to create appealing character designs, all that. If you're texturing, it's not knowing every single what every single node is going to do in Designer or every single adjustment layer. It's being able to recreate convincing materials and having a good sense of observation. So fundamentals are always going to be valuable. Basically, the programs we have now, they're going to be changing quite a lot over the next 10 years. If you go back 10 years, the industry looks very different. 10 years ago, there was basically no good texturing software. Mari had just come out. It just had layers, I think, but you could only run on very high-end machines. So stuff is changing, but what's not changed over the last 10 years in texturing and sculpting? ZBrush is probably the same 10 years ago in sculpting, but that's the fundamentals. Observation, understanding the core concepts of things, understanding like the more computer science of that as well might help you a little bit. But yeah, the core concepts are not going to be changing. Any tips for making the texture more realistic? Yes. Make sure the model is solid. And I don't mean that in jest. I actually mean that in a serious sense. Like a lot of times what you see is that when you start texturing, the model is just under modeled. And that's a problem because then you're just going to over texture it. Under modeled means you're trying to texture this guy right now, and he's nowhere near ready for texturing. So if I were to spend a few more hours on him and really making sure that all the shapes are in a good spot, all the frequencies are there, then it's going to be much easier to texture them. But also keep it simple. Don't try to overcomplicate your setup. You start off in a simple way in terms of your color map and your reference map, and build up the shader methodically. This is one of the things we talk a lot about in this one here, where we start off very early on and just start to work on the look dev. Let me see here. Like this is like early days. This is before we start texturing. This is where we are just getting started in, or we have the ZBrush model in a pretty good spot, and then we just set up the displacement map in Blender, and then we just input the maps as they're ready, just so we can keep developing the look. And this means that you know what you have to focus on. So for instance, you can see here there are some veins here to the side. If I go to this one here, there are some veins here, and that breaks the surface up quite nicely. When we're looking at the render for this without the veins, it was easy to misdiagnose it as, oh, he needs some more specular breakup because now we're texturing, so now we need to break up the specular. When in reality, it needed model breakup. So in this case, I just went in and sculpted some more shapes here just to break that up, and that broke it up really well. And you do have specular variation, you clearly do because of the veins. So figure out what's a model issue and figure out what's a texture issue. A lot of the time, it's going to be a model issue. I mean, I come more from modeling background, but I mean, when I was working in film, I spent more time, at least as much time on texturing as I did for modeling. And I found that just having a good model, it just makes everything so much easier. If you have a good model, oftentimes you can do a texture where the color map is pretty soft, like a lot of gradients and such, but if you have a model that's underdeveloped, you really have to just like overcompensate for that in texturing. When does the sale end? The sale ends next Tuesday, so it keeps going for a week. I was told you need to use the whole space of the tablet because you need to move your forearm and not your wrist. You know, whatever works for you. I tend to just use my wrist for this. It depends on the size of the tablet as well. I find that if the tablet is too large, that causes issues because you have to move your arm too much. Yeah, I think it's better just to do some stretches once in a while. Do you retopologize every hard surface geometry that you make in ZBrush for VFX ready asset, or do you just not know if it's gonna get deformed? Basically, you do it kind of the opposite way. If most things for VFX you wouldn't even put into ZBrush, you would only put in stuff that needs to properly be sculpted. So if you're doing something like a hammer or something, you don't sculpt it first in ZBrush and then you take it into, or you don't sculpt it first in ZBrush and retopologize in Maya. You're just gonna model it from scratch using cubes and cylinders and polymodeling in something like Maya. If there is something that would have to be sculpted in ZBrush, I really can't see too much what that would be in VFX, then yes, you would have to retopologize that. Aside from FlippedNormals, what was your favorite project you worked on? Pacific Rim 2. That is like the coolest thing. I think we actually had something open here. Yeah, this is from the art director work with at Pacific Rim 2. This is Jonathan Opkenhofen. Absolute fantastic art director. See if he has some more cool stuff. Yeah, this is one. This is my sculpt along with his amazing polypaint on top, or proper paint on top. So this kind of stuff was super cool to work on. Now we're going away from that. His stuff is just phenomenal in general, but this was just a really, really, really cool project to work on. The thing was, we barely had any character artists. This was the guy Morten worked on, by the way, Rygen. We barely had any character artists. So at some point, Morten and I were basically 50% of the character crew. So that was insane. Oftentimes, it's a very cluttered field. Like, you have too many people, you're overcompensating for it. But at this point, we just had a hard time crewing up for it. So we just didn't have a lot of character people, which was frustrating but also awesome because there was so much responsibility on us, and we just got to have a lot of we could just influence it quite a lot. Can you tell us about which movies you worked on? Yes, so you have to remember that. Usually what I do, I could just Google Henning Sand and IMDb because I can't keep forgetting. The thing was, I was an NPC for a few years, and at NPC they throw a lot of different things at you. So a lot of them some of them worked on for just a short while. One of the weirdest one, which seems like a fever dream, is Ghostbusters 2016. It's one of those, once in a while I'm just waking up in the middle of the night and was like, yeah, I worked on that for a few months. That was weird. I worked on one called A Monster Calls. That was a beautiful, beautiful movie. Actually one of the few good ones I actually worked on. And then one which was, if anyone from NPC is watching this, you're going to know this one. This is FOM, or Formula Monster was called, and it ended up being called Monster Trucks. Actually a really fun and weird movie. Not a good movie, but a fun movie. Just monster trucks. It's about monsters who live inside monster trucks. Then I worked on Batman v Superman, where I was texturing on Doomsday. Obviously for all this, there's a big team working on all that. So it's not like I'm sitting and texturing this or modeling this kind of stuff for myself. It's a large team helping out with these things. Then there was a bunch of different smaller things, like The Mummy from 2017. King Arthur from 2017 as well. Tarzan. Pirates of the Caribbean, Pirates 5. I worked on that for quite a while. That was a really fun one to do. I worked on some ghost sharks for that. That was good fun. Really enjoy that. And then yeah, just a bunch of different films from that time. Yeah, here's another one. Morten was just mentioning this before. We should really make a video about the mouth cavity, how to do like proper purple mouth bag. And that's something we probably will do a video on, because we keep getting so many questions about it. Basically, do it in retopology. Don't sculpt that in. That's going to be actually impossible to do. So yeah, just do that. Do that in retopology. Here's something I'm trying to do as well, just pure character design wise. Here, if you have a face like this, and this is a pure face, then if you have the eyes here and you have the nose here, then it's basically like 1/3, and it's just like the same thing here as well, and that can be quite boring. So what you can do, you can push this. So you can do, instead of this, you can put it down like so, and you can be like, no, eyes up here, nose up here, and then mouth is like, well, I guess we need one more. So eyes here, nose here, mouth. So basically you can just push it like so. So the eyes might be here, and nose might be here, and then mouth might be here. So you can really just push this up. So for instance, now we're just pushing this down. So now we just try to make it more interesting, just by making sure that there's more of a gap between this. So here, for instance, you can see that this is very even. In nature, things is very even. You know, there's basically the same spacing between all these kind of things. So I tend to try to push these kind of things, like make some stuff wider, make some stuff narrower, just like go in and refine the design of whatever you're doing. Just push and pull different shapes around. That's going to have a big impact on the overall design. I'm going to try to flatten this out as well a little bit. Basically, don't be afraid of going a bit crazy with a character like this. And like, it's really easy at this point to be like, oh, character's locked, I can't do anything. No, go crazy. Just push stuff forward, because you're going to get blind to this. Like, I have already got blind to this character to the point that I would have to revisit this guy like maybe in a few hours or so to like see him more objectively, because you get blind to stuff very, very quickly. How many years you took to master Maya? I'm not sure if you can master a software like Maya. Maya is one of the more complicated software out there. You know, obviously Houdini is probably more. The Maya is a very complicated software. It took me, I mean, I really knew 3D when I started with Maya, so it took me like a few months to be able to like operate Maya, like to a level where I was comfortable with it. But yeah, probably a few months for that. And like our friend Farid Nagi is saying, Softimage is the way. And rest in peace, Sweet Prince. Softimage was a beautiful, beautiful software. Yeah, I really miss XSI. That was a really, really good software. I'm trying to find where my FlippedNormals tab was. I accidentally closed that. So we can actually just talk about that real quick. We had a course called Introduction to Maya. Also, a quick reminder, everything 50% off currently at the FlippedNormals Marketplace, including Introduction to Maya. This is a course we made like a little bit a while ago now. It's still perfectly relevant, and nothing has really changed with the Maya at that point. And we just go through everything from retopology to UVs to a little bit of XGen to Arnold. So it just covers really everything you need to know about Maya in order to get started with that. 12 hours long, currently $30, 50% off. So I'm just going to send a link to that. This is a pretty solid course as well. It has 4.9, 30, 28 5 stars and 3 4 stars. I will take that. So yeah, Introduction to Maya is a pretty solid course. And if you want to learn Maya, I definitely recommend that course. What's your opinion where Blender is going as a software? Yeah, Blender is definitely progressing in the right direction. For me, it still needs a UX pass. It still needs, you know, the 2.8 release. It definitely had a lot of features, like new features like Eevee and such to it. But for me, it was fundamentally a UX pass. The UI got a lot prettier, and a lot of things were just more refined than before. I think it needs the same level of like a release which is as large as 2.8 in terms of UX, because it's still a bit of a mess. It's very open sourcey when it comes to the UX, where like for instance very hotkey based, and a lot of stuff doesn't really make too much sense in it. You might have to have used it for a while for stuff to make sense. But in terms of where it's going, I mean, it has a vibrant ecosystem to it. It has a lot of really cool tutorials. It has people are willing to help all the time. So it has a really bright future, and it's being adopted more and more, and it's just being taken more seriously as a tool. Is it going to like beat Houdini? It's not going to beat Houdini. Is it going to beat Maya? It's not always going to beat Maya. It's where, because Maya is so integrated into different productions that it's not going to replace that, but it might be a case that new companies starting up might be working with it for certain things, like if you're a smaller production and such, particularly because it's free as well, very easy to get. But like it's not like it's going to like replace like NPC or like anyone else like that. It's not going to suddenly use Blender for rigging or something. Which is your favorite texturing tool, which we're using for a long time? I really like Painter. Painter is fast and easy to use. That was one of the things that was really hard about texturing for the longest time, that the tools were expensive and they were difficult to operate. Mari is still not an easy software to use. You basically require two monitors to even operate that because the interface is so convoluted. So Mari is awesome, but man, Mari can also be annoying to work with. Well, Painter is a treat. Painter is one of these software that it's really powerful, though it's also missing a lot of basic features. Like it just got the feature that you can actually lock the environment light to the camera. So that's awesome. But you know, that's something we've been wanting for years. Alvaro is saying, hey, we might have worked together if you were in NPC London back in Tarzan, King Arthur. Yes, indeed. I was there. I was there until summer of 2016. So I worked on, Tarzan, King Arthur, bunch of other stuff in production at the same time as well. I was in Crowds and Layout. Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I had a feeling there was an NPC, some more NPC people in the stream. Because there are a lot of them. Now it's time to just dynamesh this a little bit. Alvaro, where are you currently working? Are you still an NPC or are you working somewhere else now? So I'm just trying to refine the bones a little bit more. You can see here though the advantage of like the VDM kit here, like so. For instance, here the horns were just dragged out like so, which is really cool that you can just drag it out. So VDM brushes and ZBrush are stupidly powerful. What are some red flags beginners should look out for when checking VFX job list or checking VFX checking job listings? Maybe terms like high-paced environment or family. Be aware of those. One thing I recommend if you're looking to find a job is talk to somebody who works there. It's very hard to get a feel for how the companies like to work at without talking to people who's there. So if let's say you're trying to work at a specific studio in the UK or something, then just find people on LinkedIn who's already working there and being like, hey, I'm considering applying here, or I got a job offer from here. What do you think? Because it's really hard to know just from a job listing. The data just isn't, there just isn't too much data, and it's written by recruiters or HR, which aren't directly connected to productions either. So, and they have different incentives than productions do necessarily, so it's tricky. This is a really good question from Solomo. Any methods for practicing sculpting anatomy in ZBrush? Yes. This is something I do with my mentees a lot, where we find a specific scan and then you try to recreate the scan. That's probably one of the better ways to learn how to sculpt characters, because it means that, let's say the guy on the right here is a scan. He's just an anatomy sculpt. But let's say he's a scan and you try to recreate that. It means that you have the truth here now. Like this is like, take away there might have been scanning issues and such, but let's say this is a perfect scan. This is now what it actually looks like. So if you have like some JPEGs or something with poor lighting, it's hard to see that, but now you can look at it one to one, you can compare it. And this means you can now like feedback yourself. You can really look at, oh, specifically, what does the mouth look like? Oh, actually mine is too thin, this is thicker. Then we can look at that, we can evaluate that. So specifically doing studies based on scans is going to help you a tremendous amount. I really can't recommend that enough. But in general, like the fundamental thing is there, sculpt humans. Don't just try to sculpt from imagination, sculpt actual humans. And then something that is useful though is once you've been doing that, then try to like do like series of studies. So I'm going to explain this one. The first one is try to sculpt anatomy person, or person with anatomy from memory. And then number 2 is look at reference and sculpt the sculpt you're seeing. Like try to just sculpt it with reference. Number 3 is sculpt it from memory again, but with no reference. And this means that you're now going to solidify things. So here you're going to do the best thing you can, but honestly it's going to be terrible. You're not going to be able to know what's up just because it's really, really hard. And then now you're correcting all the faults. If you had an issue with like, oh, actually specifically what is the structure of the nose? Well, now you can learn that at this stage here, and now you can be like, oh, actually this is specifically what it looks like. And then you can again do it now here as the last one. Now you've internalized a lot of this, but it's really, really important to use reference and use that. But don't just copy the reference methodically or like one to one, because you might not necessarily internalize it. It might just be a sense that you're just looking at the reference and you're just copying the reference. What's the best way to get feedback? Ask somebody who is good at what you want feedback on, and ask them kindly if they can provide some feedback. And then if you are good at receiving feedback, you're probably going to get more feedback, which means you have to accept that like you shouldn't have ego in it. If they're saying something to you, don't get defensive. Just say yes, thank you, or ask for clarification. Write it all down and don't get defensive about it, because if I'm giving feedback to somebody and they're getting defensive, I'm not going to deal with that. Like I'm here to help you. I'm not here to like deal with anything like that. Basically, you can think about it like this. You're over here and your work is over here. And if you get feedback on this, that is not you. You're over here and you're doing fine. Your work might be bad. Your work might be missing some stuff. That is not you. That does not mean that you are bad at what you're doing. So if you're looking at this and be like, oh, okay, but the mouth is terrible on my sculpt, and you have to rethink how a nose works. Cool. You just got feedback on how to get better. But if you think that, oh, that means I'm a bad sculptor, that's a me sentence. That means that I am bad. And instead of, no, the work is bad. And that's fine. Even if the work is bad, it doesn't matter. It's just the work. It just puts you away from the equation. It just means that you can be much more objective instead of taking stuff personally. That really, really helps me. Any tips for clean retopologize, especially for creatures? Yes, we actually have a bunch of tutorials on retopologizing. I'm going to send this as well because we cover retop A to Z here. So we really go through the whole thing. Here is a screenshot from the retopology. So here you can actually see the process of retopology. This is how I get started. So what you can see is I'm blocking out the main loops, and we just get started with that. Like very, very, very simple. And we just try to have the same amount of loops top to bottom. Do the same thing for all these. You just block out the loops. Very, very simple. There's nothing hard about this. You just block out where you want information. And then you start to connect them up. If you have loops going around here, like so, and you have loops going here, try to find a way to connect these things up. It's really simple once you understand, because like, oh, cool. Now this kind of goes down here. Then it becomes just a puzzle. And you can just try to figure this out, how this all works, how this all connects. And then this is going to look like this at the end. Where now we just have all the loops just connected up. But if you're doing a creature or a character or anything like that, the fundamentals are exactly the same. Where it just make circles or loops around the most important pieces, and then try to connect these things up. And sorry if I've missed some of the questions. It's tricky to sculpt and do questions at the same time. I've no doubt missed some of those, so I apologize for that. Is there something such as bad feedback? Yes. If you're receiving feedback and it's not helpful, it's bad feedback. Or if it comes from a bad place, if it's somebody who is trying to not help you, they're trying to bring you down, that's bad feedback. Basically, when it comes to feedback, you have to be selective about what you receive, because you can't take all the feedback. You can't take feedback you can't just take all of it. For instance, let's say with this character here, where like the feedback might be, oh, actually the nose is too far down, move it further up. Okay, cool. This goes too far out, move it further in. And then if you listen to all of that, you're left with something that's much more generic. Like you're left with something that all the rough edges have been taken out of. So you just be careful about what it is. And also, like, the feedback can be wrong. The feedback can be flat out wrong. Just because somebody tells you something is a certain way doesn't mean that it's correct. So just be aware of that. Like, critically evaluate the feedback. Not saying that if I'm giving you feedback, you should be like, I don't know about that, man. I don't know about that. It's more just say thank you. Sit down, look through all the feedback and see what's useful to you. Do we need to make our characters from scratch, or is using a base mesh better? That's a great question. And this goes into, so we talked about this on the stream this week as well, but basically, there are two things you can do to whenever it comes to working. You can optimize for two different things. The first one is going to be for learning. And the second one is going to be for portfolio. So if you're optimizing for learning, or rather it's for like cool. You're optimizing for the final result looking cool. And if you're trying to learn something, that means that you should start from scratch. It means that you should figure out what you want to learn and then build that up so that you will learn as much as possible. It means, for instance, if you're starting to do a head and you're trying to recreate this guy, you need to properly start this from a sphere and just internalize as much as you can and learn all these different things. But it means that the end result is not going to be super nice. Or you can optimize for cool, which basically means the end result is the most important thing. Then it doesn't matter how you get there. Then it matters what does the end result look like. So for instance, if I try to sculpt this guy, I obviously started with a sphere from this guy now, but he would have looked much better at a much earlier stage if I had used a base mesh. Because this guy is just a human. He's just a human with some slightly different proportions and some horns and such, but he's just a human. So a base mesh here would have been much faster. So if you want to learn, or have fun as well, that's what I'm doing now, then start from scratch. But if you're really trying to focus on, like, for a commercial project or something like that, where you just have to optimize for cool, then you'd need to basically not start from scratch. Would you say things like that? Would you say feedback like this? That thing looks wrong. This isn't quite right. This isn't feedback. I found those terms really wrong. You shouldn't say, yeah, when you're giving feedback, you should never just go, yeah, there's something wrong here. I don't know what. No, try to be specific about it. You can be like, well, if you look at this shape here, if you compare this shape here to this shape here, you can see that, whatever it is you want to say, you can say that, well, maybe we need to push this further down. Or you can say that, oh, actually, you forgot to add the shape in here. You forgot to add this. So if we look at the reference, this is what's there. This is why I always recommend people to have reference as well when it comes to feedback. Like during mentorship I'm having, I always ask students for reference, because otherwise I might give the wrong feedback. But try to be specific in your feedback and try to get to the why of why something looks wrong. Your job giving feedback is not to point out what's wrong. It's for the person to learn. If you're pointing out what's wrong, like what's the point of that? Like, you don't get any points for that. It's about truly helping the other person get better as an artist. So if you sculpt with ZBrush, what utility will using Blender provide? Yeah, the cool thing about using Blender is that ZBrush is good for sculpting, and that's kind of it. Like Blender is, let's take this guy here as an example. This guy here, we're actually using Blender. So you see here we have a sculpt, and this is after like different chapters, right? So here, this is after the first chapter. But before this, there is actually a different chapter, which is where we get started in ZBrush, or sorry, in Blender. And what we're doing there, we're just starting with a cube. And this cube is basic as it can be. It basically just has like a quick, it just has a quick scale to it, so that we know that this is like 40 centimeters. So here we're using Blender for this, so that's cool. And then at the end of this stage here, we're using Blender for retopology. And then we're sculpting a little bit more, and then we're using Blender for UVs. And then we are going into, let's see here, yeah, Blender, UVs, topology, and then we use Painter for the maps, and then we use Blender for lighting and rendering. We're setting up a displacement map here, and then we are setting up the skin shader, and then we are rendering the whole thing out. Just going to send a link to this. Just as a reminder, 50% off all products on FlippedNormals. So Blender very much has a place within like a character artist workflow. And now, to honor Morten, I'm gonna break his nose because we can't have a heading sculpt which doesn't have a broken nose. That's preposterous. So breaking his nose just a little bit. And again, to honor Morten, we need a scar. Where should we put this scar? We can put the scar here, but this way this time. And we can continue this down. It's almost like he's been cut here or something. Do you retopologize before adding final details to avoid distortion? Yeah, basically, the reason you do retopology before you do the final details is because there's a large chance that you have to, like, when you reproject your sculpt, that something goes wrong. That just something just messes up, and then you have to re-sculpt that area. So you might as well just not sculpt that before, or sculpt in the final details before the whole thing is there. So yeah, basically, do your retopology once your shapes are there, once the main design is there, but before you have all the final details. What is the most underrated feature of ZBrush that a few people know about? Yeah, this is a cool one. Let's talk features in ZBrush. So this is something we talked about briefly in one of the earlier streams, but I'm going to explain this. So let's say we have hopefully you guys will know about this. Some people will, for sure. Let's see here. So if you scale this down and they're at the same level, then what we can do, if we want an anatomy model now to fit here, it's really hard to look at these at the same time, right? And you want them to be next to each other. Go to transform, and then go to split screen, set this to 1. Boom, there we go. You can just hide this one now, and now whatever is active is going to be on the right side. So this means you can just work on top of this. So this is super cool. It's a really, really powerful way of working. So this means, for instance, if you have a scan, this works particularly well with scans. That means you can really go in and you can just start to compare these things up like so. So this one is awesome. Again, that's just under transform and then split screen and then 1. Another one as well that you probably know about, but it's just a handy one. It's just hit the 1 key. Well, this is a custom hotkey I have. Control, Alt, and click on the solo button. Then hit 1, and now you can make a hotkey. You can just solo this right away. What part of character creation do you enjoy the least? Yeah, probably going from retopology to like reprojecting stuff. That kind of stuff is quite annoying. Also, if you're working in production, you have a lot of technical stuff. Like you have a lot of like textures or like UV sets and vertex reordering, all that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is really annoying. The stuff I enjoy the most to flip it is just the pure sculpting. Also texturing as well. I really enjoy that. And also enjoy at least general troubleshooting. Stuff is always going to go wrong, you know, to some degree. There's always something that goes wrong. And also, well, also on the least category, XGen. Doing Groom, honestly, because I just find the Groom tools to not be very good. Like XGen is kind of fine once you get into it, but man, there are a lot of things you have to get right there. So general Groom in general, I just find grooming to not be at a particularly good spot, and it's never been. Like, and now people might say, oh, but Houdini and XGen are solid tools. Yeah, but you have to, the learning curve to get into them is so high. But with XGen, it's not even the learning curve that's necessarily high. It's just the fact that it's just unstable. Stuff breaks all the time. So that's really annoying. Like in, maybe Mike is still listening to that, but in the intro course he made to us, he made a introduction course, absolutely brilliant course. And in the beginning it's like, set this up this specific way, or this whole thing's gonna break. How long is the sale gonna be on for? The sale is on until Tuesday next week. So slightly less than a week. I now broken up symmetry. That's quite fun to do. Sculpt generally looks much better. How long have we been going now? We started at 2. It's now 4:30. Oh, we've been going for like 2.5 hours now. Generally useful to just like add some asymmetry as well, just like change up his face a little bit. Oops, gotta hide the model here. But yeah, so not going to continue this way longer now. Gonna leave this kind of soonish. Gaming industry or movie industry, which is better? What is the process difference, and easy or hard? Both industries are tricky. I don't think there is an objectively easier industry, like versus film versus games. They're different in different ways. Hard to find somebody who's worked in both who can give an objective view on that. But like in general, they have different challenges. For instance, in a film, the contracts might be shorter. While in games, you may work at a place for longer, maybe on a contract for the whole game. Compensation is also different. Where you live is different. So yeah, just a very, very broad question. So sorry, I can't answer that. Not because it's not necessarily as a knowledge thing. It's just that it's such a broad question, which is better or harder or easier, games or film. They're just different. They're just different industries. How do you guys deal with burnout as an artist, especially as a student? Yeah, this is a case where you should do what I say, don't do what I do, because I've had multiple burnouts as an artist. Not so much like mental burnouts per se, more like physical burnouts where I've just been destroying my body. So don't do that. Honestly, take breaks. The quickest and easiest thing is just take breaks. Now, for instance, I was sculpting for like 2 hours or so with this guy. I haven't taken a single break. Obviously, I'm streaming, bit of a different thing. Also, only 2 hours, but try to take a break every hour. Like take a 5-minute break, and just stretch your body around, like just move your body around, move your neck around to side, and just move it around. You can see this when I'm evaluating the streams later on. You're going to see my head is just in the exact same spot. It looks like almost like the internet isn't working because I'm so static. But also go to a gym. Like keep your health, take your health seriously. Really, like your body is not built to do this kind of stuff every day, all day, every day. So you need to take care of it. Listen to your body. Get enough sleep. It's all this kind of boring advice, but it's just what makes sense. There isn't like a magic thing. There's no app to avoid burnout. It's just take breaks. It's better to have a slow progress and get a job 6 months later than it is to burn out like a crisp and just be completely destroyed. It's a very, very tricky balance because there are two things that are true at the same time. You have to work really hard to get a job. That's just the way it is. While at the same time, you need to take care of your body. So, like both Morten and I, we worked really hard during uni and we both were able to get jobs, but also took a toll on our health, to be perfectly honest. Here's a good question. I want to learn 3D modeling. Can you suggest any roadmap or something? Well, I can suggest a course, actually. We did briefly talk about this one before. This is a course we made, came out this year, I believe. Time is weird this year, but it's called Introduction to Modeling in Maya. Now, if you're not using Maya, doesn't matter. It's just a fundamental modeling course where we go through how to make this at the end. But before that, you can see here, there are a bunch of chapters. And these chapters here are basically going to be your roadmap for becoming a good modeler. It's not like everything you need to become a modeler. There are more things. You have to practice a lot. But like all the tools, you have it. All the tools you have will be here. Like if you have all these tools, you really should be able to start approaching all the different tasks. You're not going to be able to model absolutely everything because you just need practice for that. But you're going to be able to figure out how to get there. Truth be told, you can really model most things with very few tools. So once you get comfortable with these tools, then modeling becomes quite kind of simple. It's interesting, like I always, whenever I see time lapses from like really solid artists, there was one, I believe his name is Jordan Kane on Twitter, fantastic modeler. He posted a time lapse today and like how he models, and he's a really good modeler. And I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to learn his Jordan's secret because he's so good. And then you'd watch it and it's just poly modeling. I'm like, ah man, I don't know what I was expecting. Not because his modeling techniques aren't sophisticated. That's just modeling. Whenever you model anything, really, it's just extrusions and merging. If you have extrude, move, rotate, scale, and merge, you can really model anything. And then it's really about how do you approach it, like in a smart way and such. Okay, I'm just gonna move the ears up a little bit. What you can also do to add a bit more appealing character is to first just disable symmetry here, and then we can just move his eyes around a little bit. This is kind of like the handing trick I do. This is just move it a little bit to the side. You just see you get a lot more character right away too. What is a reasonable time frame to get a full character done? Yeah. I don't know, but it really just depends on so many factors. Like, what's the complexity of it? Like, what's your skill level? What do you actually mean fully realistic character? If you're doing a portrait, if you're doing a full body, it really depends. For a film or a game, that's going to take a long time, like months and months and months to do it, to get a fully realistic character. What kind of maps are baked for movie assets? How is it different from games? The difference is that it's not specifically like what kind of maps are different. The fundamental difference is that if you have like basically like a line from like a graph here from like this is like cool. You know, this is like the coolest thing you can do. This is just a pure beauty. This is full on realism. I think realism is better than cool. And this is full on performance. Then you need to have a graph. You need to like find where you're going. If you're going with full on realism, that means you're not really taking shortcuts in terms of like you're not really baking anything. You're not really simplifying things down into full-on maps. So let's say you aren't baking any normal maps, and let's say it's all here. That means it's going to be impossible to do performance. But if you do like full-on performance, it means you bake absolutely everything, or you don't really have maps, and you're just really focusing on performance. It means it's not going to look particularly good. So you're going to have to figure out where you're at. Gaming is definitely like towards here, and film is definitely towards here. But it's not like it's full-on realism, because like you still have to be able to animate it and rig it and all that. So it's not so much like, oh, in film you bake this map and in game you bake this map. The fundamental difference is that film focuses on the visual quality as the key thing, while games focuses obviously a lot on visual quality as well, but it will just have to run 30 to 60 FPS. Like no matter what, that will just have to be met. So that means that, for instance, in film, you don't really bake things. You don't really bake normal maps. You just subdivide models until they look nice, or use sub-D modeling. Well, in games, you would use way more normal maps, and like you would smooth the normals and use normals as a way to actually get detail in your model and control the sharpness and such. So it's a very hard question to answer. Basically, end of the day, games will be focusing on performance and film will be focusing on trying to make it as realistic as possible. This is a question that Dave have been posing a few times now. Sorry about not being able to answer it before now. Have you ever lost your way as a 3D artist? I mean, has a job ever lost its meaning to you as an artist? Yeah, I think at that point you just have to take a break. You just have to take a break. Go, maybe just don't go on Twitter or Instagram or anything like that for a while, and just try to go back to, just take a break for it, and then you can slowly go back to it and figure out why you went into 3D in the first place. And then try to maybe focus on a specific thing you really enjoy. It's a bit tricky if you do it as a job, because then you can't just take a break from 3D. But yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. It's a little bit similar to burnout as well. But yeah, taking a break from it and figuring out what you would really enjoy doing is definitely a good idea. Can I become more richer as a 3D artist? I don't think I understand the question. I mean, 3D can be pretty well paid depending where you work and what you do. So like, you know, definitely a lot of people who make pretty decent money doing 3D, but it depends entirely on where you live and what you do and how career focused you are and all that. I asked this on Twitter, but I'll ask here: would a Surface Pro 9 be a usable workstation with ZBrush? Honestly, I have no idea. I never really worked with the Surface machines. You just have to I don't know, get one, try it out, and return it if it doesn't work or something, or check the specs. I've never worked with one of those computers before. Have you ever sculpted your face, like looking in a mirror while sculpting in ZBrush? Yeah, that's a ton of fun. You learn a lot from that. You're going to see a lot of weird things about your face that you can't unsee afterwards. Yeah, definitely a good idea to do that. Here's actually a tip, by the way, about sculpting. You can see here I've been sculpting for like 2 hours now, but I'm still like 700,000. Like, it's still pretty rough in terms of loose, in terms of like the poly count. So that's just something to consider, that you really don't want to go too crazy on the poly count too early. So now I'm just trying to break up symmetry layers a little bit. Another thing you can do as well, you can just mask off half the, like the head like so. Let's try this. Actually, I think I have to, no, I can just mask it off like this, just control painting it, just trying to make the, go like this. I basically just want to post the body just a tiny bit. Just trying to make a broad character mask. Move it down like so, and then we can just rotate it. This kind of stuff can also help create a bit of character as well to it. Just doing a little bit of this, maybe rotating around slightly, moving it in. This kind of stuff is just going to help you create more character. You can see how much more character there is in right away. Just make sure to work without symmetry. What is the role of asymmetry and realism? The role is that people aren't symmetrical. So obviously in this case I'm doing a bit of like just a fun little sculpt. So I'm not trying to aim for full-on realism at all. But people are just quite asymmetrical. So there's going to be a lot of weird variation with the people have weird idiosyncrasies. So you just need asymmetry in a sculpt. Though be sure, from technical note, make sure to don't do asymmetrical topology as much as you can, because that's going to be a world of pain. What is the best way to expose yourself to get a job? I mean, I guess that means like how do you spread the word out about your own skills? That's basically marketing. The best way to get people to notice you is honestly do solid, consistent work. If you're on social media, like maybe even ArtStation and such, just write proper descriptions of your work, appear like be a nice person, ask people for feedback, but also just keep outputting good work. Like the best thing you can do is to just have a strong product. Then people are going to find you. If you have a weak portfolio and trying to get a job, it's never going to work. No matter how many applications you send out, you just need to have a strong portfolio for that. What are some of the ways we sabotage our progress and confidence as artists? Comparison is the thief of joy. You cannot compare yourself to other people because you're always going to have people who are much, much, much better than you. If you go to ArtStation, you're just gonna you feel like crap afterwards if you start to compare yourself. If you go to be inspired, awesome. But if you start to compare yourself to other people, yeah, you're just going to be in trouble. And what I mean is there is always going to be somebody better. I'm not saying that you can't get legit good at what you're doing. I'm just saying that, let's say you're the best person in the world at sculpting characters, like, or sculpting humans like this. Like, there is no such person. There was no best person, but let's say there was. And now you have somebody who's better at sculpting animals. That person is going to be like, man, I wish I was as good as her as sculpting animals. It just means that there's always somebody who's going to be better at you at something. And no matter what it is. And if you start to compare yourself, you're always going to feel envy. So probably that is like the number one thing we do to sabotage ourselves as artists. Yeah, that and don't do drugs. Yeah, don't do drugs. That's, I suppose, pretty good idea as well. And when learning multiple software, should we prioritize on improving one software or generalize on the software? Don't really know what you mean about that. If you could elaborate on that, that'd be nice. He accidentally got flipped upside down now, but I'm just gonna go with it. Just seeing it from a different perspective. Yeah, Flipped Meshes is our sister company. Is Mari worth learning if you want to enter VFX? It's pretty expensive and I'm already paying for ZBrush and Maya. Good news is Mari has a non-commercial version, which is going to be totally fine for you to learn it. The difference is that it has something like 6 UDIMs as a limit. So yeah, Mari is very much worth learning if you want to do VFX. Painter is being used more and more, but like Mari is still a very, very solid tool. So if you want to be a texture artist in VFX, I highly recommend that you know Mari as well. Which courses do you recommend this Black Friday? Well, that is a great question, Tiago. Let's talk about that. So we have a 50% off on all products for Black Friday. So here are some of the most recent things we made, which I can just talk about. Some really cool courses here. So first one, we have Advanced Character Creation with Ben Erd. Again, all 50% off. Fantastic course by an absolutely brilliant artist. Ben is like one of the best guys in the industry. This is a very advanced course. If you're a beginner, this course is not going to be the right one for you. But if you're an advanced artist, I highly recommend this one. Then we have Realistic Character Portrait Masterclass. This is the one I just finished. This is where we learn how to make this guy, like, from the first brushstroke to like the last little hairs. We really go through everything from concept sculpting to retopology, UVs, doing the groom in Blender, doing subsurface scattering, doing horns, all that kind of stuff. It's 21 hours long, almost 21 hours. And the focus is really on everything. So if you want to see the whole progress, this is pretty solid. It's more like between intermediate and advanced. It's pretty advanced in the sense we do focus a lot on the result, but everything is explained throughout the industry, or throughout the course. Then we have this one. This is one Morten finished this spring or early summer, and here you learn how to do the whole thing from scratch. This is like this is a really cool course. So you learn how to make this one start to finish. Then we have the anatomy bust. This is the one I've been using. This is a really, really helpful bust just for creating like a good starting point as anatomy. Then we have the Mega Kit. This contains the Eye Kit, Skin Kit, Face Kit, and Creature Kit. So this one contains all sorts of stuff. This one is basically a really solid kit for creating characters, where you have eyes, you have skin textures, you have Creature Kit stuff. So this one is incredibly solid. There is not a 50% discount on the mentorship, unfortunately. So I'm just going to be sending some of these courses in the chat here. But yeah, just feel free to go to, I'm going to go to, this is the link to FlippedNormals Creator. And also you might have to go up a little bit in chat because there's a bit of a delay here, obviously. So you might be wondering why on earth are there just product links coming here. So yeah, it depends what you want to learn. So if you guys are interested in some of the FlippedNormals courses we have, just ask what you want to, just let me know what you want to learn. I can see if there are any courses that would fit what you're interested in. Or if you have any questions about specific courses, let me know. Also, Tiago has a good question about anatomy courses. So here we have a really good course by Christian Bull. Fantastic course. This one is awesome. This is just a solid anatomy course. And then we have another one it's not anatomy specific, but it's sculpting. It's called Introduction to Sculpting. Sending a link to that as well. This is a really solid course as well. This is like, I made half of these courses, most of these courses, I think. So I'm a bit biased here. But here you learn really a lot of various concepts. What gives commercial license? Commercial license just means you can use it for paid work. Like if you're a student, you just learn for yourself. You just want a personal license. As a beginner, should I begin with sculpting in Blender or ZBrush? Probably just if you want to learn to sculpt in ZBrush, I recommend 2 courses. If you see the link above, that was Intro to Sculpting, but I also recommend Introduction to ZBrush as well, because ZBrush is a bit of a beast to learn. So I highly recommend this course as well. So Intro to ZBrush combined with Intro to Sculpting, like you legit get most of what you need to get started with sculpting. At the end of that, you should be able to really get quite far with sculpting yourself. And then you can have courses like, just going to close some of these guys, like this one here, where you can take it to the next level, where you can combine all of it as well. Also something we can talk about as well is I made a texturing course. This thing came out this year. Who knows? This one here is called Character Face Texturing in Substance Painter. This is a really solid course as well, where you just focus on how to do the whole thing. We start off with a model and we just go through the whole thing, how to do this start to finish in Painter and in Maya. And just going through how to make a skin shader, which is pretty convincing. Going back to ZBrush now to sculpt, and we crashed. We crashed while I was not in ZBrush. So I think that means that it's time to leave the stream now, because we've been going for like almost 3 hours now, so that's quite a lot of time. So I'm just gonna take some of the last questions. How does ZBrush crash when I'm not in ZBrush? There was a fun bug in ZBrush some years ago, where this is like 5, 6, 7 years ago or something, where if you hit Control S, it would crash. Good times. Yeah, early ZBrush Christmas present. Sculpt the Stash asks, is it better to texture or sculpt tertiary details? Yeah, that's something that a lot of people know I'm asking. Both are good. The advantage of sculpting the details is that it's direct. You can use alphas directly onto the character, and you can you just see it immediately. Disadvantage is that you need a high poly count, and you can't really change it. If you do this in Mari or in Painter, you can very easily move them around. Which one should I take first? Intro to ZBrush or Intro to Sculpting? Intro to ZBrush first, so you get familiar with the tool, and then Intro to Sculpting is fantastic later on. Any Houdini courses? We don't really have a whole lot of Houdini courses. It's one of the things we really want to expand upon. Sorry if there are any There are a lot of questions here, so it's hard to sculpt. If I missed your question, I apologize for that. I'm not deliberately avoiding questions. Do you have anything for ZBrush and environment art? We have something from Fast Track. Fast Track, this is made by Emil Sligers. Emil has done a lot of really cool courses for us, so have a look at some of the courses he has. He definitely uses ZBrush for some of these guns, so if you're interested in environmental courses, this is probably one of the better resources for that. Emil does really solid work, and he hires some solid people as well for some of the courses. So there are some really, really cool ones here. This one, for instance, here's using, I think is it Maya, or at least it's Unreal Engine 5. I'm not sure. Yes, Maya, Substance, and Unreal Engine 5. How do you do this whole thing? Really, really cool course. So I'm just going to send this over as well in the chat. Is it work from home career in VFX feasible, or will you have to move in the future? Impossible to say. It's, I mean, right now there is a bit of a problem with work from home. Like, you can work from home, but you might have to be in the country just due to tax regulation. So maybe that's up to them in the future. But what some people do, they simply just work as freelancers. So you can definitely work as a VFX artist from Switzerland, but you might have to have just be a freelancer, and you definitely will have, most likely would have needed to be on site at the beginning. If this is your first job, you should not do work from home. You need to be in the office. I really think it's a terrible idea to go through and then start to work from home, because you just need to be in office to meet people, because there are going to be so many questions, so many things you don't know how to do. So I highly recommend that you're in office at least a little bit in the beginning. Do you know any resources for or courses for character presentation inside Unreal Engine 5.1? Unfortunately, I don't. I'm not sure if that's if there's been a lot of cool courses yet. Courses are still coming out using Unreal Engine 4, right? Like it might take a while before there is a really proper before the ecosystem is really there for UE5. But yeah, we can do just a few more questions, and then I'm gonna sign off. I started learning ZBrush this year, but I also want to learn other software such as Substance Painter and Maya. Should I prioritize ZBrush or general learning all software? I think it's a good idea to learn at least the software you want to learn. At least if you want to do characters. I don't know what you want to do, but let's say it's characters or environments or anything like that. You need basically one sculpting software. Pretty important to have a sculpting software. So you can do also sorts of organic shapes. You need some kind of painting software so that you can paint maps, and you need some kind of general 3D software. If you have that, then you can really do most things. But if you're missing one of them, if you're missing sculpting, that means it's really hard to do anything organic. If you're missing painting, it's going to be really hard to paint something. And if you're missing the general 3D software, the DCC, then it's going to be really hard to combine it all. So luckily we do have courses on all that. So we have for Intro to Painter. This is actually one of the most popular courses we have. So here's Intro to Painter. Intro to Painter is a really, really cool course where you just learn all the things. It's a 4-hour course. You don't really need a whole lot more than that. And then we make this at the end, just going through the whole thing. This is also pretty highly reviewed. Yeah, 37 reviews, 4.78. I'll take that. I'll take that review. So I recommend learning a bit of everything. Learning Painter, learning ZBrush, and learning Maya is a good combination. Character creation course for beginners. This one here might actually be good. The Frankenstein one. This one here assumes that you know the basics of ZBrush, but in terms of like the sculpting part of it, a lot of this is explained. It's not for complete beginners, but it's somebody who's been doing this for like maybe a few months or something. So you may not be able to get the exact same result at the end, because it's sculpting for a while, so it takes a while to get up to that. But you can definitely follow along quite closely. What's the difference between look dev and texturing? Look dev is basically where you're defining the material, and texturing is where you're defining the technical texture maps you have. I don't really like those terms. I consider it more one holistic thing, where it's like it's more surfacing. Instead of just, oh, you have maps and then you have the shader or material. It's one thing. It's really like a map is just modulating the material. So I find it useful to think about a surfacing. But yeah, technically, texturing is where you do the texture maps, and look dev shading is where you do the actual shader. This is an excellent question about Beanlight games. Which exercise is more effective for 3D character artists? Lots of short models or a few weeks long models? This is like basically like kind of my core philosophy when it comes to teaching. There was like I have half the facts here, but basically like a story people have been telling about this is there was a pottery class where it was divided in two. One of the groups was told just make quick models, learn as much as you can, and smash them at the end, or just leave them, doesn't matter, reuse the material. And the second one was told to really focus on making beautiful pottery. They would spend a lot of time on it, and by the end of it they would see who was the best. And the class who made made a lot more and smashed them and learned from it, they progressed significantly faster. The key here is that you need to learn from it. It's not just do a lot of crappy work. It's like learn as much as you can from it and then move on to the next one. The reason is just that it's not about like the 1,000 hours of learning. It's about like the 1,000 revisions of the work. It's about iterating on your work. So I see this a lot like in my mentorship as well. I have students who they might have been spending like 2 weeks on a model, but there are still foundational issues that if they spent 30 minutes on a model, I would have been able to catch that issue after 30 minutes. So there are a lot of foundational issues. When you just get started with it, just spend like a few hours on each model and learn as much as you can, and then move on to it. Like Yo here is saying, fail fast. That's really, really the case. Fail fast and then learn as much as you can. Pinakawas, probably mispronouncing that, apologies, is saying time boxing studies helped me a lot. Time boxing simply means you set a time for it. It means that this study here is 2 hours. This is what I do with my students as well for mentoring. You have 2 hours with this exercise. I want to see what you can do in that time. The advantage of that is that you won't be tempted to noodle on things. Like, when you've been doing characters and you noodle around for like 20 minutes on a certain part and you can't tell the difference, you should just move on. If you know you have 2 hours for the whole thing, or let's say it's a whole character, you have an hour for the head, an hour for the arms, an hour for the torso, an hour for the legs, you will just spend that time and then you'll move on to the next one. So just time box things, fail fast, like the comments are saying. Fantastic way of doing it. And then just do tons of smaller projects with the goal of each one of them. And like we talked about before, you can optimize for different things. You can optimize for learning, or you can optimize for cool. You don't want to optimize for cool if you're learning, which means that if the goal is to have something cool to show off, you're going to have to approach it in a different way. But if you want to learn fast, for instance, a good way to, if you want to learn anatomy is, let's say you were trying to figure out what the bicep is. Right now, tell me where the bicep originates from and where it inserts. Or like do it in a ZBrush. Bring up a quick skeleton and try to just with a sphere show me where it is. Most likely you're not going to be able to do it. But then if you look at some reference and you look at the origin insertion point and then you figure it out, you're like, aha, now I get it. I realized I didn't do it. I didn't get it beforehand when I was trying it from a sphere by myself. But now I know it. And now you failed. You set yourself up for failure, productive failure. And then you can do it again. If you try to do it again from a sphere, you can probably do it. Yeah, that's the one. Scapula ulna. Yeah, Bill, man, is a current mentee, so we're going through a lot of this kind of stuff this week. But yeah, we'll stop here. Just a quick reminder that we do have a crap ton of products on sale. We have tons of resources like the eye kit, drag and drop the eyes into any scene really, into Arnold or Blender or anything like that. Anatomy for sculptors, fantastic course if you want to learn anatomy. And then we have Intro to Sculpting, which is awesome for that. And yeah, I just want to talk quickly about, show you quickly this one here. A Realistic Character Portrait Masterclass, where we do go through the whole thing. I really think this is like gonna really help. Yeah, Emil is here. Fast Track is saying that, hey, you just got back. Yeah, I was just showing your store, Emil. I think I have it open here somewhere. I was just showing how many cool products you have. Let's see if I have it up still. I might have closed it down. But yeah, definitely check out Fast Track tutorials stuff. They have really, really solid stuff. So yeah, that's it for today. We'll be back with streaming tomorrow, and hopefully Morten will be able to sculpt then. Let's see if his internet has wind in it still, or if that's still not great. Hopefully it will be fine. But yeah, thanks to everyone who joined. We've been doing this for 2 hours and 48 minutes now, so it's been quite a lot. So yeah, thanks to everyone for joining. We'll probably do another stream tomorrow at the same time.